Hi everyone, E3 Scott here. I just wanted to welcome you to kind of a video tour of my ParkJet workshop and sort of a detailed description of some of the materials and components and things that I like to use building my ParkJets. If you're not familiar, you just happen to maybe find this video by mistake or whatever, this is essentially what a ParkJet is. It's a radio-controlled airplane made out of foam. The motor is kind of mid-mounted or prop-in slot, as you can see here. It has a compartment for other electronics, receiver, speed controller, and a battery. All made by hand out of plans that I purchased from the internet, and foam and some paint. Very inexpensive way to get into the radio-controlled hobby, and lots of fun to scratch build. So I'm hoping that as we go through this video, I've been flying ParkJets now for about 2 years. So a lot of lessons learned. A lot of trial and error. Very heavy on the error side early on. So I'm hoping that through this video I can just kind of pass on some of that knowledge and experience to you. If you're I will say this: if you're new to the hobby, you don't necessarily have to use everything that I use. There's all kinds of information available out there, and when I post this video on the blog migsorus.blogspot.ca that I share with my great friend Stefan from the great state of Alabama, I will have some links to some great information if you're just getting into the RC hobby or getting into ParkJets in general. So I'm hoping that there will be something for everybody. Some of it may be more beginner geared, some of it may be more advanced geared. There might be some information that just flies right over your head. But please, I would strongly encourage you, if you have any questions or comments, please leave me a question on the YouTube video or on the blog post. And I would encourage you to go to that blog post, because I will try and have links for most of the important components and things that I use in my workshop and stuff that I've accumulated over 2 years of scratch building foam ParkJets. So anyway, I appreciate you coming to the video. I apologize up front for a lot of my ums and ahs and pregnant pauses as my brain catches up with my mouth, or vice versa. There will be times I'm probably called something the wrong thing. I'll try and correct that when I edit it. But I appreciate your patience again, and I appreciate you watching my video, and I hope that there's something in here for you that you'll find helpful. And please, as I mentioned, don't hesitate to ask any questions at all, either on the YouTube channel or the blog post. So thanks for watching, and enjoy the video. Hi everyone, just wanted to talk in this section primarily about foam and carbon and other reinforcement that I use. But first of all, I just wanted to cover quickly sort of the layout of my work area here. My workshop is set up in a spare room in my house, so I don't have like a big workbench area like you might have in a workshop or a garage or something. I know this area down here looks very unorganized, and it is, but I know where everything is, so that's the important part. So this is where the magic happens, if you want, right here in this main work area. So this table is just it's like a plastic or composite material of some kind, utility work table. It folds, not that I need to worry about folding it, but it's very, very strong, very solid foundation for my work area. I think I paid about $40 for it on sale at Home Depot, or maybe even Staples, something like that. But there's lots of places around that sell them, so good work area depending on your setup for your workshop. This is a craft cutting mat. This one's 18 by 24 inches. Very, very handy. I think I paid around $20 for this one at Walmart, actually. The good news about it is this can actually use both sides. So this one's getting pretty gunked up with glue and paint and stuff like that. So you can flip it over, although this side doesn't have the grid. The nice thing about it is that it doesn't let your knife slip, but it also doesn't bind your knife when you're cutting. material on top of it. And you know, I've thousands and thousands of cuts I've made on this, and you know, it's getting a bit rough down here in the main area where I cut, but other than that, it's in pretty darn good shape. It's about a year old, other than the paint and glue that I've spilled on it. It also has this nice grid on it, so you know, I've got inches down the side and along the bottom here. And if you prefer working in centimeters, a metric system, you can spin it and then you'll have centimeters. So whatever you like to do. The handy thing about it is if you really need to quickly measure something, you don't have to pull out a ruler. You've got the grid right on it, or you know, if you want to cut a piece of tape a certain length, it's quick and easy rather than digging out a ruler. So very good, well worth the money for like 20 bucks to protect your works table and give you a good platform to work on. For lighting, I like to use, this is just a telescopic desk lamp picked up for 20 bucks at a hardware store. I just took the clamp off the bottom of it and actually just bolted it right to my table, so it's not going to go anywhere if I bump it with a sheet of foam or anything. And the nice thing is, because it's you know, I can adjust it and put the light right where I need it, depending on what I'm working on. So that's very adjustable that way. I also have another one over here. It's bright in here right now because it's, you know, middle of the day, but sometimes it'll be a bit darker in here, so it's nice to have a good source of light. So anyway, so those are the basics. Put my setup here. So let's talk about foam. So primarily, I build all my planes out of 6mm Depron. Now I live in Canada, and Depron's not a material that's used in building here in Canada like it is in Europe and some other parts of the world. So pretty much the only way you can get this is to buy it from a retailer that sells it for craft or hobby use, which is what I obviously use it for. So this is a 27-inch by 39-inch sheet, or 700 by 1000 millimeters. And I buy it in boxes of 20 because I can get about 12, 13 airplanes out of a box of 20 sheets if I'm frugal with the use of foam. So it works out really well for me. The other handy thing is, now these plans aren't trimmed, but I like to get these plans printed off. These are the Untitled PDF plans for an RC Powers MiG-29 version 4, one of my favorite planes. And the plans were built, set up and designed so that you trim them down and you can lay the whole sheet out on a sheet of the foam of this size. So that's what I like to use. I wanted to just say one thing about these plans. I don't have you know, like a big Kinko's you know, in my area that has a big printer. I do have a Staples, but their printer's not big enough to handle these plans. So I went and looked around, and I've actually got a very good relationship going with a local mom and pop commercial printing business. You know, they do signs, cards, all that sort of stuff, and their prices are very, very reasonable. They charge me $4 a sheet, so about $8 for a standard set of plans. And if I print 10 sheets or more, they knock 25% off the price per sheet. You know, I keep the ladies at the front desk in good humor by taking them a box of donuts every once in a while, so that works out really well. So I would encourage you, you know, even if you have one of those big places in your area, you know, talk to some of your local print shops, because you might find yourself getting a much better deal. And you know, it's nice to support a local business if you can. So anyway, that's how I get my plans printed off, and it's worked out really well for me. All right, just briefly, if you've never used Depron before, it's kind of like plywood. It has what I call a good side and a bad side. So this is the good side. It's far smoother. It has much less indentations in it, and it's kind of a flat sheen. I like to use this part on this side on the top of my planes, because it tends to finish and take paint a lot better and just looks better. So this is what I use on the top. And then on the bottom, I know you're not going to be able to see this obviously in the video, but this is the bad side, or the other side, I guess, if you want. It has more indentations and it's shinier than the good side. So I like to use this on the bottom, because I'm not worried about paint on the bottom of the plane. I keep about 90% of the bottom of my plane white, and because it's a bit shinier, then I get a bit more reflection from the sun, which is good when you're trying to keep track of your plane. So anyway, so there's 6mm Depron. I like it. It's, you know, it's a bit more expensive than model plane foam or some of the other foams that are available, but I'm used to working with it, and I just, you know, to me it's worth the money to use Depron, but just my personal choice. All right, one of the other foams that I use, and you hear me, if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll hear me talk to them. This is, it's actually, hopefully you can see this label, it's Adams Foam Board, or Adams Ready Board. You hear it called by several different names. Adams is the company that makes it, R.L. Adams. And it's also called Dollar Store Foam, Dollar Tree Foam. This is a full sheet of it as it comes when you buy it. It's 20 inches by 30 inches, has paper on both sides of it. It's quite stiff with the paper on it. So a lot of people have built, a lot of people build using it because it's very inexpensive. This sheet costs $1.25. I like to use it for my KF4 airfoils because it's, you know, it's cheaper and I don't have to use up Depron. And I'll talk about it a bit more. I like the thickness of it a little bit better. So anyway, to get the paper off of it, I buy this solution at the dollar store, or you can just mix it up yourself. But you want about a 50-50 mix of rubbing alcohol and water. And then I just put it in one of these spray bottles, and I'm not going to demonstrate it to you right now because it does make a bit of a mess. I tend to take it outside, and then what I do is I just spray the entire, you know, just get the paper pretty much saturated with the solution. And what happens within about 20 to 30 seconds, the paper starts to wrinkle and bubble, and you can just kind of grab a corner and whoosh, off comes the whole sheet, and then do it on the other side. And then you've got the paper off, and it just, you know, it's not as stiff then, but if this paper, if you build your plane out of this with the paper on, it'll be heavier, and then if it gets wet, it'll be much heavier, and then you'll probably end up with problems with the paper wanting to peel off. But flighttest.com uses this pretty much exclusively. A lot of people build with it, so it's not impossible to build with, but I tend to use Depron for the primary build, and then this for airfoils. So there's Dollar Store Foam. Really good stuff for the price. All right, so here's 3 samples that I've cut to just small pieces. So there's the 6mm Depron, so you know, quite stiff. When you do whack a plane, normally, unless it's a crunching blow like on a nose, it normally tends to snap pretty clean. Like if you know, hit a wing or a vertical stabilizer or elevon, it'll snap pretty clean, and it's pretty easy to just, you know, run some glue along the broken seam, put the 2 pieces back together. Works really well. So that's a nice thing about Depron. Here's some dollar store foam with the paper off, so you can see difference in thickness there. This is, whoops, the dollar store foam is about 4 or 4.5 millimeters thick with the paper off. So that's why I like it for KF airfoil. So you can picture, if you can picture a piece of this sandwiched on, or the Depron sandwich between 2 pieces of this. What I find is it still has enough thickness to give me the effect of the KF airfoil. I like to use KF4s. Where I fly, it's windy most of the year, or there's some kind of wind, and I find with the KF4 I get much better stability and tracking with my planes, and also some better speed. So that's why I like the KF4. And then because this is a little thinner, I still get the stability effects of the KF airfoil, but I don't get such a thick wing as I do if I was to use Depron top and 6mm Depron top and bottom. And I like the universal, you know, I like the symmetrical, same thickness top and bottom for my airfoils. Some folks like to use thinner on the top, thicker on the bottom. It all depends on your personal preference. And then this is 3mm Depron. And normally, sometimes RC Foam, where I order my foam from, they'll put the odd scrap sheet of this in there. So I've started, if I need it, I'll just buy a sheet, and then they can toss it in the box when I buy my 6mm stuff. It's good for repairs or just small gap filling because you can actually compress it down quite a bit if if you need to jam it down into a little gap, or if you've cut your foam and there's a bit of a gap and you want to reinforce it. The other thing it's good for is repairs. Lots of times, especially on nose repairs, if you've gonked your nose and you work the foam back out as much as you can, you still end up with like a little bit of an indentation where the foam kind of bent over on itself. So what I do is I'll just roughly cut pieces of this and then glue them sort of into that indentation, and then you don't have as much foam to sand off to fix it up. And then a little bit of paint over top of it, you'd hardly ever know. So 3mm Depron, good for repairs and gap filling. So anyway, there's the 3 types of foam that I use. So for carbon fiber reinforcement, this is 4mm carbon rod, so it's completely solid all the way through. Nice and stiff and strong. I like to use this for my main wing spar, sort of from wingtip to wingtip. It is twice as heavy. This is 3mm carbon tube. You can see more flexible, and half as light as this, but not as strong. So I'll use this for my wing spar, for elevons, ailerons, or not ailerons, sorry, elevons, vertical stabilizers. I like to use this 3mm carbon rod because in shorter spans it's it's good and strong. Most 99% of planes you can use this stuff also for wing spars. Keeps things light, prevents you from buying more. My personal preference, I like to use this carbon rod for wing spars. I just find the extra strength is worth the weight. So anyway, 3mm carbon rod, and this is 2mm carbon, 3mm carbon tube, I'm sorry, and this is 2mm carbon rod. Now I use this primarily for making my own push rods, which I'll talk about later on in the video. But there may be short sections, where you need a couple inches, but you don't want to, you don't want to use a big chunk of 3mm tube or 4mm rod, and this works well for that. So I always keep any spare pieces around that I have. So now these are bamboo skewers, and a lot of people use these, and I always have a bag of these handy because you never know. For shorter sections like your elevons, vertical stabilizers, that sort of stuff, I've used a lot of this in the past. Works really well. Probably not quite as strong maybe as 3mm carbon fiber tube, but hey, the price is right, These are like $1 for 100 of them, so dirt cheap. What I tend to do now is, because I've been building for a couple of years, is I've got when I recycle a plane, either after I've written it off in a crash, or I just don't want to fly it anymore and I want to recycle it for some other, take the parts out of it. I recycle all the carbon out of it. So this one obviously it still has a lot of foam and glue on it. So what I'll do is, while I'm watching the hockey game or the football game or something, is I'll just sit down and take as much of this stuff off by hand, and then I'll use a knife. And this was where I don't throw my old blades away right away. Use a more of a dull. It's still obviously going to be very sharp. You do damage to yourself if you cut yourself with it, but it won't tend to slice the carbon as much if it's a bit duller, and then you can just kind of scrape the bulk of the residue off. You're just mostly taking that off so that you save weight, and then also to give the new glue a good surface to bond on when you glue it back into the foam. So always a good idea. I recycle as much of this as I can, and because most of my planes are all the same size, I don't need to trim the pieces down too much. Here and there I might need to cut an inch off or so to get it to fit into another plane, but saves you money, and you might as well recycle it, because I've used stuff in 2 or 3 different planes that works just fine. All right, so there's foam and carbon and bamboo reinforcements, and just a general look at my work area here. So I'm going to take a pause now, and the next section we're going to talk about the tools that I like to use in building my planes. So we'll see you in the next part. All right, folks, I've got my set rearranged here. I just wanted to talk briefly about some of the tools that I've sort of accumulated, and I think most of these, if you're going to do any serious park jet building, you'll want to accumulate over time if you don't already have a good set of tools. And which I do, but I just kind of get these, have these mostly for just for building my plane, so I have them all in my workshop. So I'll start off, I think you need to have a good long metal straight edge. This is actually a meter long, but it's metal. You know, because there are going to be times where you're going to need to measure something that's longer than 12 inches. And also for when I'm doing my score lines to get the channel ready to put my carbon fiber rod in my wings, it's definitely handy to have something that's long and made out of metal. So good idea to have a metal yardstick. Again, I picked this up at just about any hardware store, not terribly expensive. So metal yardstick. It's also, I think, good idea to have a good metal ruler for a straight edge, because I use this a lot. You know, when I'm beveling my hinges, you know, so you kind of lay the ruler down on the foam, you know, right up against the edge, and then, you know, cut at a 45-degree angle. Good to have a shorter straight edge. So this is a regular 12-inch or 30-centimeter ruler made out of metal. Also a very good thing to have. This is a obviously clear plastic ruler. It's handy. I like to play around sometimes and modify my planes, and I find when I'm doing measuring and cutting on the actual plans themselves, it's easier to have a clear ruler, because then I can you know, see the actual lines on the plans a lot easier through a clear ruler, and line things up if I want to, you know, move something a quarter of an inch or something. Much easier to use a clear ruler. Got this at the Buck store for I think $1. So good buy there if you need to be able to see through your ruler while you're measuring things. Couple other good things to have if you want to play around or just double check, you know, play around with modifications or check an angle on something. Always good to have one of these protractors. This came as part of a little geometry set I bought at the dollar store, again, along with a couple of these, you know, just a 90-degree angle. These are a real handy thing to have. I mean, obviously you can make one out of foam yourself if you want to, just for giggles and grins. But this is nice if your vertical stabilizers need to be 90 degrees, or during any part of the build you want to check a 90-degree angle. It's nice to have one of these. The only reason that you might make one out of foam is if this is a little bit too big to get into an area to check something's 90 degrees, you can make one, a smaller one out of foam, but also very handy to have. You know, I've got a huge collection of writing instruments and things like that. I find that for drawing lines on foam, that just a plain old ballpoint pen tends to work the best. It does leave obviously some residue after you've cut it, but you can just a light brush with some sandpaper, I'll take that off if you don't want it. But I find that just a plain old ballpoint pen will draw a line on pretty much any type of foam that I use. Also, this is just a little 5mm or 7mm mechanical pencil. You know, for drawing on the plans, handy to have. The other thing I like to use this little tip for is it's a good thing to make a groove in the foam. You know, so I'll lay a straight edge. Normally I use this on the back side of score lines, and you know, if I want to put a little groove, just, you know, sort of press the pencil in there, and you may not be able to see it, but it makes a little groove in the foam. So then I just run like foam tack glue or whatever in there. So if you want to make a line in the foam without leaving ink behind, that's another good method. So again, handy to have. Alright, so that's mostly the measuring and drawing tools. So let's talk about knives that I like to use. So I've got 3 basic knives here. This one, you know, it uses these blades here, so you've got a sharp end on either side, you know, initially. So basically 2 blades for one. The reason I use this for probably about 80 to 90% of my cutting, for cutting plans out, that sort of stuff. And the reason that I like it is it has a metal handle, very, very strong and solid. so the blade is not, the knife is not going to flex while I'm cutting, and it just feels good in my hand. So again, I got this at Home Depot, but you can get these at pretty much anywhere, and it, it has sort of a jackknife type setup here. But this is the knife I probably use for, like I said, 80 to 90% of my cutting. I buy these blades in bulk. At a hardware store, I keep an eye for when they come on sale, and I'll buy like a couple packs of them at a time. So I probably go through half a dozen of these blades, so using both sides in one plane. It's always better to have a good sharp blade than not sharp enough, because when you're cutting foam, the cutting foam dulls these blades very, very quickly. So I just buy a bunch of these in bulk. These are like a contractor size. Works out really well. So the other knife, this is just a number 11, I think they call it, X-Acto knife. And you can get these, all different companies make these. It's just your basic little craft knife, more like a scalpel than anything else. I like to use this if I'm doing, when I cut out the holes in my foam to put my servos, or any time where I need to do really delicate kind of little surgical cuts. This is a handy little knife to have. So always good to have one of those. And you can buy replacement blades for these through Hobby King, dirt cheap. So I normally, if I need to bring my weight up by a couple of grams to take full advantage of my postage, I'll throw in a pack or two of these blades. So another good knife there. This is another great style of knife. Again, this is, I got this knife I think from Hobby King, but you can get this type of knife at the dollar store, pretty much anywhere else. What I use this primarily for is shaving. When I'm getting ready to finish my plane and I want to shave, an edge or a square corner, that's what this knife comes in really handy for. Now this blade in here is pretty dull, but you can also, I know a lot of people use these. These are the one. This blade is the one where you just, if you want a sharp tip, you just snap off the piece, and then you have several blades there, I guess, all in one. There's other. For the application that I just showed you, there's other knives similar to this, but the blade is a bit narrower, and for the application that I like to use them for, I don't prefer those knives, because the blade being narrower is much more flexible, and it doesn't cut as well, and then you could end up, it could end up snapping, and you could end up cutting yourself. So anyway, this is primarily a finishing, shaping type blade for me, for what I like to use. So anyway, so those are the three knives. Again, you can also get replacement blades for this one anyway, through Hobby King, or I find them at the dollar store as well. So those are the three types of knives that I like to use. All right, just basic tools. A good pair of scissors. I like to trim my plans down as much as I can to to fit my plans out on the foam, so I can be frugal and economize my foam. So that's primarily what I like to use those for. And if I've got a big sheet of plans here in my work area, it might be quick to cut it with a knife, but then it's more difficult. So I just use a pair of scissors. Works really well. Again, probably got those from the dollar store. Pair of tweezers. You never know when you might need to reach in and grab a servo wire to feed it through somewhere. I also use these when I make my my decals and my insignia for my planes just out of paper, that I print off on my printer, and then I put glue on the back. So these are kind of handy to place the the decal without getting paint on glue on your hands. So always good to have at least one pair of tweezers. I think I got these again at the dollar store. Work really well. All right, screwdrivers. This is a main screwdriver here. It's a multi-driver. Here in Canada, the screws that I like to use for my motor mounts are, they have a Robertson head on them, so you're probably not going to be able to see that, but it's a square thing, which I think is pretty much unique to Canada. And I can buy these at the hardware store, cheap like Borscht. But this also has flat blades, different Phillips blades, or tips, so pretty much everything I want, and relatively inexpensive at a good hardware store. So that's kind of my main screwdriver. This little screwdriver I think came with some kind of ARF that I bought at Hobby King a long time ago, but it's the perfect size Phillips tip for servo screws, and it's, you know, it's, if you need to get it into some place, it works out well for servo screws, so I just happen to hang on to that one. These, you know, it's good to have, I have a couple of them depending on how sort of wide a channel. After you score the lines on your, you know, for your carbon fiber reinforcements, it's handy just to take this and, you know, kind of pluck the foam out. So I have a couple of these, you know, just flat blade screwdrivers for that purpose, and then you never know when you might have a small screw that you need a flat blade for. So those are pretty handy to have around. This is a 1.5 millimeter hex driver. The little quick connects that I use for my servos have this, so I have one of these on my workbench and one in my flight box at the field. So those come in handy for adjusting for those quick connects. Alright, so a couple different pairs of pliers. You know, these are just your basic pliers if you need to get a firm grip on something when you're doing anything, you know. And these are a bit adjustable too, so good to have one of those, a pair of those, I think. And I think, you know, dollar store. Pair of needle nose pliers, again, you never know when you might need to pinch something down or whatever. Good to have a set of those. These are, you know, just my standard side cutters, wire snips, whatever you want to call them. Use these a lot, you know, for especially for the electrical portion when I'm need to trim wires down or whatever. So these are very, very handy, and these are pretty good quality. So I wouldn't scrimp on these, because if you buy the cheaper ones, I have a pair from the dollar store in my flight box, and they're about as good as an old butter knife. So I wouldn't scrimp on this tool here for cutting wires. Handy to have one of these for you know, for stripping. You can cut wire with this, but you know, it's handy for stripping the insulation off of wires when you need to solder your you know, connectors on your speed controller or your motor or whatever. So handy to have one of these little tools around for doing that sort of stuff. For soldering, I just like to use these little soldering. This is just like a little soldering pen, I guess, if you want. Weller. So it's a good quality one. You know, now that I've been building for a while, I have, you know, several speed controllers and motors that already have all the connectors and stuff on them, so I don't do as much soldering as I used to, but handy to have one of these. So anyway, so that's just basically some of the basic tools that I think are very handy to have, and, you know, for you to accumulate if you're going to have a serious workbench, park jet workbench of any kind. Those are kind of some of the basic tools that you might want to think about to help you out with your builds. There'll be probably other tools that I might talk about later on in different phases of the video, but this probably covers about 95% of the tools that you might need to scratch build a park jet. So there we go. So next up, I think we are going to talk more in detail about adhesives, glue, tape, that sort of stuff. And so I'll reset my movie set here, and I'll be right back with you for the next phase. Hi folks, got the movie set reset here with some new props. So during this portion, I just want to talk to you about some of the adhesives like glues and tape and things that I like to use in building my planes. So this is Elmer's Craft Bond. This is what I like to use on my plans, whether I've used the big rolled up, the big untiled plans like I've showed you, or even the tiled plans, you know, for the templates, the pieces of the plane that I'm going to lay down on the foam. I spray it on the, you know, give it a good shake. Obviously, you want to make sure it's well mixed. And I spray it on the actual paper and then put the paper down on the foam. Now, always use less than what you think you might need, because if you use too much of it, the paper will stick to the foam a lot more than you want it to, and then you've got to really work to get the paper off the foam, and you can end up chewing up the foam. So just you know, use a very fine mist with this stuff, and it'll work well. And it allows you, it doesn't pardon me, it doesn't dry real hard right away, so you can reposition the paper until it is where you want it, and then just cut the paper and the foam at the same time. Very, very handy stuff to have. There's all different kinds of stuff. This is sort of what RC Powers has always recommended, and it's always what I tend to use. And I can get it at several different places where I live, so it works well. But any sort of repositionable type of glue to hold the plans onto the foam works real well. All right, this is Foam Tack by Beacon Adhesives. I've been using this now for about a year. It's not cheap. It's about $10 basically a bottle. If you're if you use it frugally, you can probably get 2, maybe 3 planes out of a bottle of it. But it saves you huge amounts of weight, probably like an ounce, maybe an ounce and a half, 2 ounces. Some people have said they've saved, but easily an ounce, ounce and a half probably I save per plane over using hot glue. So it's, in my opinion, well worth the money. So very good stuff here. It dries very flexible, so it's good to use. Also good to use for hinges. I've actually made hinges just out of foam tack without any other reinforcement, and they've lasted a real long time. So very good product for the money. Foam Tack by Beacon Adhesives there. Okay, I also use this is 5-minute epoxy. This is stuff I get from the from Hobby King, or I got it from Hobby King a long time ago. Uses you got an epoxy and a hardener. Works really well. I find anything that's wooden, like my wooden motor mounts or my control horns, I like to use this stuff because I've experimented using hot glue and foam tack. Hot glue's heavier, and foam tack I find I've had control horns come out on me, so I just like the security of 5-minute epoxy. There's also other uses for it, like some of the FRC Foamies planes. You have to join 2 pieces together to form the wing plate, and if you're looking for a good, strong, stiff glue joint, it's tough to beat 5-minute epoxy. Doesn't smell all that great, and you have to mess around with mixing it up. I just mix mine up on scrap pieces of wax paper, stir it up with an old toothpick, use what you need, and then toss the wax paper in the garbage, and then saves you a lot of mess. So 5-minute epoxy, very good stuff. I also use, sometimes if I'm putting my motor mount on especially, and I end up for some reason with a little bit of a gap in between the wood and the foam, I use the foaming Gorilla Glue. Now this stuff, I think, if I was to guess, it foams up to about 10 times the size of what you put on. So it's good to fill in gaps, and it's very, very strong. The thing is, you want to put on as little as possible when you put it on. Just put on a very, very thin coat, because, like I said, it will expand. So if you put if you just kind of goop it in there, when it dries, it's going to look like somebody's attacked your plane with insulation, spray insulation foam, and then of course it also adds weight. So use very little of it, and then if you think you need to use a tiny bit more to fill a gap, better to go and add more than goop it all up. Again, what I do with this is I just squirt a little bit of it on a piece of wax paper, and then use a toothpick actually to apply it, and then you have less tendency to than if you just squirted it right in there. Then you can apply it very sparingly. So, but it's very strong, works really well for filling gaps between your motor mount and your wooden motor mount and the foam. So very, very good product. This is 3M Super 77 spray adhesive. What I like to use this for is when I put on my KF airfoils, I rip off a sheet of wax paper, piece of wax paper, lay my airfoil down on it, give it a good even spray. It is a spray adhesive, and then use it that way. I've got a good even coat of glue between my KF airfoil and my wing. Works really well. It does set up pretty quick too, though. So after you've sprayed it on your KF airfoil, get it up off the wax paper. Wax paper is less likely to stick than regular paper, but it'll still stick to your wax paper. So once you spray it on, get it off the wax paper, get it on your plane. But this stuff is really really good. I've used this on, I think, just about every plane I've ever built with KF airfoils, and it's worked great for me. This is Aleene's original tacky glue. I use this primarily just for putting on my decals on my plane or my insignia. I'll even sometimes thin this out a little bit because it is a bit thick. I'll thin it out a little bit, maybe with some water or water alcohol, but it works well. My friend Stefan also uses it when he's doing a lot of glassing with fiberglass drywall tape. He'll use this stuff as well. It's a bit heavier than foam tack, but much cheaper. This is a 16-ounce bottle, and I think it was cheaper than a 2-ounce bottle of foam tack. So it definitely does have its purposes, and very inexpensive, and you can buy it at Walmart, just about any craft store around. So very good. And I also still use, good old hot glue. In my opinion, it still has its applications. What's great when I'm using foam tack, I like to use it in a kind of a spot welding, so if I've got a long area and I want, I'll use just a tiny little dab of the hot glue to spot weld, because the small dabs of this stuff dry really quickly. The thing you have to be careful of, although and I used to build, I was a notorious heavy builder, and then after going through the 12-step program at Overbuilders Anonymous, I learned to build much lighter. Each one of these little mini glue sticks weighs 4 grams, so it doesn't take long before you've added an ounce of weight to your plane if you're not careful with hot glue. It's still inexpensive and a very easy way to build, and if you don't want to spend the money on foam tack or can't get it where you live, from what I understand, this is made in the States, and companies will ship it to me here in Canada by ground. But if you live outside of the U.S., it might be harder to get. So there's another product called UHU, U-H-U, POR, P-O-R. There's a couple of different types of that, but if you do some research on the internet, you can find the version of UHU that's very close to this, and that's available in more parts of the world than foam tack. And I think, from what I've read, it still works as well. But anyway, good old hot glue gun, for spot welding and for other applications. I haven't thrown it out yet and never will. The other nice thing about it is when the gun's hot, you need to melt the foam a little bit, like when you want to recess your magnets or whatever. It's an easy way to sort of melt and shape your foam in small areas, just using the hot tip of the glue gun. So obviously it's not hot right now. Not like I have asbestos fingers or anything. So anyway, so those are all the adhesives. So for tape, well, obviously, there are good old Scotch tape, especially if you're using the tiled plans and you need to tape your pieces together. Again, I think I just buy this because it's going to be one quick use and then throw it away. This is just transparent Scotch tape that I get at the dollar store. So that's always good to have a roll of that around. This is basic masking tape. This actually is a roll I still have from Staples, but I also buy it from the dollar store real cheap. Mostly what I use this for is in the planes, the score and fold planes. There are times where you glue and you want to hold the two pieces together, and on a curve, like when you're putting the nose together, it's much easier to hold them together using this masking tape. I don't find this masking tape is actually very good for paint. If you need to mask off an area, the paint tends to bleed underneath the tape, in a painting situation. But for holding pieces of foam together, when you're constructing your plane, this stuff is great. So again, and if you buy it from a roll of it from the dollar store, you haven't spent a whole lot on that. So that's just basic. I think that's 5/8 inch wide. Anyway, basic masking tape. This is fiberglass strapping tape that I get. The only place I can find it where I live is Staples. I'll see if I can find an end of it here for you. Oh, okay, here we go. So this stuff has fiberglass strands running lengthwise, and I have. So hopefully you can see that there. I have a roll of this in my flight box that I take to the field for quick repairs. Where I would probably use this is if I have a, like on my FRC Foamies SU35 build, sometimes on planes you have a score line that's a bit curved maybe. So this, using the tape on the back of score lines, this is the tape that I would use on the back of a score line, because that fiberglass provides a little bit more strength, and the adhesive on this stuff is really good. So this is fiberglass strapping tape, and I think this is about 5/8, 3/4 inch wide. Good to have that thickness. So this is transparent duct tape. Now this is Scotch brand tough duct tape, and I like to use this over the Duck brand, DUCK duct tape, which is a very popular brand. And the primary reason is, hopefully you can see it there, or maybe against the purple, it has a lot more strands of fiber in it than the Duck brand. And I've also found that the adhesive on this is much better for adhering to foam. Now I use this on the to reinforce the bottom side of my Elevon hinges, and you can use this. I've made dozens of planes using this as my hinge material, and it works really well. So anyway, this is better. I find this better than the Duck brand. I get this at Home Depot. It's a bit more expensive than the Duck brand, but in my opinion, well worth it. So that's transparent duct tape. I should mention, you'll see a lot of people building with 3M Extreme packing tape. I can't seem to get my hands on 3M Extreme packing tape here where I live in Canada, so I find this stuff works just as well. So if you can't get 3M tape where you are, have a look around and you might be able to find some transparent duct tape similar to this stuff. It works well. Alright, this is fiberglass drywall tape basically, and what I use this for is for making my hinges, I use a combination of this and the foam tack glue to make my hinges on my planes, and also in areas on like on my intakes on the inside of score lines and stuff. I use this to reinforce seams on the back of score lines where I need extra strength. Again, just it has adhesive, a bit of adhesive on one side, so it's really handy. And if you use the foam tack glue in conjunction with it, it works really well. So this is blue painter's tape, but this is actually good quality painter's masking tape. And I find when I'm painting foam, the Depron foam, if I want a really crisp straight line, this stuff is expensive, much more expensive than the other masking tape, but I find it's well worth the money to prevent the hassle, because what I'll do is I'll put it down on the plane, like I'll just demonstrate here, put down where I need it, and then what I do is I just take kind of a rounded surface, like maybe this marker or something, and I really press it down into the foam. And because it is more expensive, lots of times what I'll do is I'll just cut it down the center, and then I've got two narrower pieces, but they have a straight edge on either side, and I save myself some tape. Then I just got to be careful that I've only got about 1/2 an inch or 3/8 of an inch of tape to mask. But this stuff works really well for paint purposes if you need to mask. And the other key thing is I use acrylic craft paint, which I'm going to talk about some more later, is once you've painted the area, is take the tape off right away, and then it's less likely to bleed underneath the tape. But anyway, that's the tape I like to use for actual masking for my paint jobs. Alright, so there's glues and tape, adhesives in a nutshell. So next up, I think we're going to talk about electronics, motors, speed controllers, receivers, radios, things like that. So that'll probably be about the longest phase portion of this video, but lots to cover there and discuss. So that'll be up next. Hi everyone. At the end of the last segment, I mentioned that next up we're going to talk about electronics. Pardon me. And what I decided to do is break this into a couple of parts. You can spend a lot of time talking about electronics because they're the guts of your plane that make it fly. Obviously, without your electronics, your plane's just a shell of foam that can't really do too much. So I thought for this segment we would talk about transmitters, receivers, some gadgets that you might need to get depending on the mixing capabilities you have in your transmitter, servos, and some necessities that you probably need to help set up certain planes regardless of what your transmitter can do. I'll talk about the transmitter that I have, and it depends on where you are in the hobby. If you're just getting started off, there's overwhelming probably amounts of information available on the internet and on YouTube. But I would encourage you to go on YouTube and get a couple brand names or model names of different transmitters, type them in, because there's a lot of guys around who have done some really great comparison videos between this radio is a Turnigy 9X from Hobby King, and comparing it to Spectrum DX6i, other kinds. So there's lots of information available out there to allow you to get some comparative kind of ideas before you start spending money. What I will say is, if you think you want to get into park jets and might progress into it fairly seriously, is get yourself a radio that's you can kind of grow into, meaning that it probably has more than what you're going to need initially, but has room to allow you to grow, so that you don't get to a point where you have to go, oh, my radio can't really do much anymore, now I have to go buy another radio. When I first started off in park jets, I had a Spectrum DX6i, which is a very popular radio. It's a great radio. But as my setups, my builds got more complex, my setups got more complex, I very quickly outgrew the mixing capabilities of that transmitter, which is why I ended up with this Turnigy 9X, which I'll talk about more in depth. So that's something that you want to consider. If you, like I said, if you do want to get into it, make one purchase if you can, and then get yourself a transmitter you can grow into, or that's expandable if you get down the road and you decide, oh, I want more capabilities, and you can expand it. So this transmitter, and I'm not trying to shove this down your throat, because if you sit 10 RC pilots down in a room and they all have 10 different transmitters, they'll talk to their blue in the face about theirs being better than yours. So you just, you have to kind of get, it's like buying a computer, you just have to get what works for you, and not worry about keeping up with other folks. I would say this though about this radio, if you're just getting started off, it's very inexpensive. For $60 from Hobby King, not including shipping, you get the radio, you get this module which you need for the radio to work, and you get an 8-channel receiver. So all you need to do basically is put batteries in it and you can start flying. I'm not sure, I've never actually used it without that upgrade, without the upgrade I'm going to speak about shortly I should say. But it's still a fairly capable radio. And then, even on a park jet, you're probably not ever going to need any more than 8 channels. And even if you go to an ARF where, or build another plane where you're going to have gear and flaps and all that sort of stuff, 8 channels should fit the bill for you. Okay, so $60, that'll be enough to get you started. And then if you decide you really want to get into some complicated mixing and do it all within your transmitter, you can get a circuit board that you can put in yourself. There's great videos available on YouTube on how to install those. It's called a Smarty Parts board, and on the blog post I'm going to post links to how you get all this stuff. And it's about a $50 upgrade, I guess. It was $50 anyway, delivered to my door, so that's including the shipping. Essentially, you just have to unscrew the back of the radio. The circuit board, you don't even have to solder it. It comes with all the hardware that you need and the harnesses, and then you just need a USB connector cable. You can connect it to your computer, and then you need to download some firmware and some software to allow you to flash the circuit board with what's called ER9X. If you have spent any time around different forums, you'll hear about ER9X quite a bit. And it's a firmware that allows this radio's capabilities to just go unbelievably high with respect to mixes and adjustability, tunability, all that sort of stuff with your servos and things like that. So For me, as this radio sits here right now, it has a backlight installed as well, which you can also buy from Hobby King, and there's good videos on how to install that. Shipping and everything else included, this radio is probably about 170, 180 bucks, and it's more than what I'll ever need. And that also includes, I bought this, this is a 3-cell Lifey 1800 milliamp. I fly a lot. I probably average 4 flying sessions a week, and I only have to charge that battery about every 3 weeks to a month. Obviously you need a charger that's Lifey compatible, but it also makes the transmitter much lighter in my hands. So again, that is included in the 180 bucks I mentioned. These are aftermarket sticks that I put on here. You can also buy different. I'm a thumb guy. I fly with the ends of my thumbs. I know there are guys that fly. A lot of guys who fly or pardon me, pinch flyers. They like to fly like this. But anyway, these have just sharper teeth on the top. I got these from Hobby King for 4 or 5 bucks. They just feel better against my thumbs. Now these little gadgets here, I tried these out last winter. Where I live in Canada, it doesn't get brutally cold, and I'll fly down to probably just about freezing outside, 5 degrees or so, maybe 40 degrees Fahrenheit is very manageable. And what these are called turbo thumb big thumbs or something like that. But anyway, if it's got turbo in the name, it's got to be good. And it just gives me a little bit better feel. These wouldn't be good. I mean, probably not good for you if you're a pinch flyer, but if you're a thumb flyer like I am, they're good when my thumbs get a little bit numb in the cold. So again, $4 upgrade, not bad at all. So like I mentioned, with this transmitter, you get an 8-channel receiver. Now this is pretty big and bulky compared to lots. Like if you compare it to, say, the orange receiver that a lot of guys who run Spectrum and stuff use. The 6-channel orange receiver anyways. And it's also heavy. It weighs about 14 grams, so about a half an ounce, and it's pretty bulky. If you're going for real complicated setups, details, all that sort of stuff, then you probably will use quite a bit of this, or you'll want the capability to have 7 plugins, one for each servo and one for your ESC. For maximum adjustability, maximum tunability. But again, it takes up space and adds weight. So what I like to use, this is a 6-channel receiver that's compatible with my transmitter. I run 6 servos on all my planes, 2 for rudders, 2 for ailerons, 2 for elevons. And what I do with my rudders is I just normally connect them with one of these Y harnesses. So this end goes into the port in the receiver, and then each servo has its own plug-in, and then they get the same signal. If I was doing a complicated mix where I wanted V-tails, then I'd probably use this one. But this works just fine with that setup. And then each other servo has its own individual channel, like my ailerons and elevons, and then it gives me maximum tunability on those as well. It's probably half the size and less than half the weight. This one weighs about 5 grams. So even if you don't use this, and let's say you've got an 8-channel, 9-channel transmitter, but you don't necessarily need a big bulky 8 or 9-channel receiver, it's something to think about. If you can get away with a 4 or 6-channel receiver that will still be compatible with your transmitter, saves you some space and saves you some weight. So this is my favorite receiver that I use with most of my planes now. Okay, so if you have a setup, you have a transmitter that doesn't have a whole ton of mixing capabilities, but you still want to be able to set up a complicated setup without buying a new radio, you're probably going to end up at some point in time needing an onboard mixer. So what this essentially does is, let's talk about elevons, since that's one of the simplest things to talk about. So you're going to have one of these leads is going to go into your elevator port on your receiver and one into your aileron port. And then you plug your 2 elevon servos into this mixer part here. And what this little circuit board does is it mixes those 2 signals together. So as you move the stick on your transmitter, it gives you the elevon elevator and aileron mixed together. Now there's no real easy way to tell you how to set these up. You know, you just have to kind of plug it in, move the stick around, and see how you go. Sometimes you have to reverse how the servos are plugged into the mixer. You might have to reverse how these are plugged into the receiver. You may actually have to go into your transmitter and reverse the aileron or the elevon or both or whatever. You just have to sit down and be patient and play around with it, try different options until they work. There's not really any checklist that I can tell you. These are two different brands. This is the GWS that is sold by Hobby King. I think it's about $9 or $10 now. This one's from Heads Up Hobby or Heads Up RC in Florida in the US. These, even though this has quite a bit more wire, they weigh about the same. But this one I find is much smoother. This one still sometimes will glitch a little bit, you know, because it's not processing as quickly or as smoothly. But this one I've used in the past when I had my DX6i radio, and it worked really, really well. And it's only about $8, so something to consider if you live in North America anyway. If you live in Europe, the shipping might be not worth your while, depending on, you know, what Hobby King, or you can, a lot of local hobby shops even sell these things. But those are a couple of different types of mixers that you might need. This is a signal reverser or servo reverser. Sometimes you know, you're setting up a complicated plane, and you might need to actually reverse the signal that goes to your servo, because reversing it in your transmitter is still not making it do what you need it to do. So rather than pulling the servo out of the plane and then putting it back in, running into problems with how the servo is mounted, you can plug this into your receiver, and then this little thing works its magic, and then the signal comes out the other end when you plug your servo in reversed. So you know, it might be something if you really need to do that, if your transmitter is not capable of it, might be handy to have one of these. Each of these things weighs about 6 grams, you know, just so you know. And obviously, when you start looking at having to bundle up all these wires into a bit of a rat's nest, it's going to take up more room in your plane. Probably the most complicated setup I had before I purchased my new transmitter, or well, it's about a year old, so it's not really new anymore. I had an F18 version 2 from RC Powers, and I had elevons, independent ailerons, spoilerons for high alpha, and V-tails, so mixing rudders and the elevator, because the V2 didn't have thrust vectoring in the prop wash. I had three onboard mixers and I think 3 Y harnesses, and when I purchased this transmitter, I was able to take all that stuff out. I saved an entire ounce of weight, never mind all the room. So that's something to think about as well when you're looking at transmitters, is if you can avoid putting all this stuff in your plane, it makes your life a lot easier. Okay, so actual servos themselves, you probably can't tell in the light. This one's solid black, this one's kind of a transparent dark gray. But anyway, this is a 9-gram metal gear servo from RC Timer. Costs I think about $4.95, and this is a 9-gram nylon gear or plastic gear servo, also from RC Timer, but it weighs 11 grams. I wrote an article a while ago on the blog, and my experiences with metal gear versus nylon gear servos on park jets, and I know this kind of flies in the face of RC Powers and their you know, telling everybody to use metal gear servos, but you know, I've experimented with nylon gear servos a long time ago, and I've yet to strip one of these RC Timer servos, knock on wood. Maybe I've just been lucky, but I have not yet to lose a plane, period, from stripping a nylon gear servo. But anyway, again, maybe I've just been lucky. So primarily, what would you say? Well, why would you be worried about it? Well, if I'm building a plane with a big motor like the NTM Prop Drive 2700 from Hobby King, which we'll talk about in the next part, it chucks out a lot of turbulence and prop wash. So I found from experience, I will put the metal gear servo on the elevons for that, because they're just a bit stronger and more insurance. So that's when I'm not really worried about the extra weight. But then I will still, on my ailerons and rudders, use these nylon gear servos, because if I can save 4 grams per servo in 4 servos, I've saved half an ounce of weight, which, you know, in the long run ends up being fairly important. On my medium planes, where I'm going to use the Focal Price 2700 motor again, which I'm going to talk about in the next segment, I'll put 6 of these nylon gear servos on, and I've never had a problem with them. They've all worked really well. These are about $1, I think $1.98, so cheaper than most of the blue servos. You know, the HXT 900, Tower Pros, things like that. Work really well. I find they're quieter. This one has a short servo arm on it, but they have a long servo arm, an extra hole compared to the blue ones, so more flexibility on how you can set up your linkages. They're smooth, quiet, strong, and inexpensive, and if I can save 60 or 70 cents per servo, then, you know, that all adds up as well. What I will tell you is if you buy anything from RC Timer, I live in Canada, as I've already mentioned, and I count on at least 6 weeks for delivery. Their shipping is free, but what you save in money, you pay for in time. So if you need servos by the end of the week, don't order from RC Timer unless you live in China maybe, or you can go to their warehouse and pick them up yourself, because it's going to take a while for them to get shipped to you. But in the long run, you know, these don't have labels on them, they don't look fancy, but they just work. And after 2 years of flying park jets, it took me a while to find these, and I'm glad that I did, because now they're the only servo that I use. But again, it's just my opinion, my experience, but they work great for me. So good servos from RC Timer. So here's a couple of accessories that, regardless of what your radio is capable of, you're probably going to need to purchase at some time. This, again, I mentioned, is a Y harness. So great applications for things like rudders, where you're not too worried about mixing, but you have 2 servos and you want the same signal to come out of your receiver to those servos. So you can buy packages of these from RC Timer or from Hobby King, like 5 or 10 at a time. So and you know, they're very inexpensive to buy that way. So I would suggest you know, getting a package of them to have around, because you know, at some point in time you're probably going to end up using one of these in a plane. This is just a simple servo extension. So if you know, if you have a setup where your receiver is too far away from your servo and the lead on the servo can't meet the receiver, you can just plug one of these in and it gives you an extension. This is just a 6-inch one. Again, you can buy them in packs from Hobby King and RC Timer and other places online. So you know, just shop around and get what fits your budget. But again, I would suggest getting a pack of these and having some of these around, because you never know when you're going to need them. And last thing you want is you know, you got a plane all built and then you realize your lead's not long enough, and you can't fly until you get some of these from your local hobby shop. So good things to have on hand. All right, so there's transmitters, receivers, some gadgets that you may or may not need to help your servos do what you need them to do. Metal gear and nylon gear servos. Again, links for all this stuff will be posted on the blog post when I put this video up. So next up, we're going to talk about the power setup. So basically motors, props, speed controllers, and batteries. So again, that'll probably be a bit of a long section, but we'll handle that separately from all of this stuff. So I'll go and reset my my movie set here, and I'll be back with you shortly. Hi everyone. I just realized after discussing servos that I probably should have covered push rods. This is just a standard 256, I think, threaded Dubro rod, which work really well if you're just getting started off in the hobby. It's you know, they're what RC Powers recommends, and you know, they're relatively inexpensive and easy to get. Pardon me, even at local hobby shops and things. So anyway, but they are a bit heavy. So a while back I started actually making my own push rods. Now, I talked earlier about material. So this is 2mm carbon rod, and these little nylon clevis I just buy, close up there, these little nylon clevis I just buy from Hobby King. And so all I do is I have to drill this little part here. I have to drill that out a little bit in order to fit the carbon rod in. And then what I do, I find epoxy works the best. I've tried foam tack and I've tried hot glue for this application, and they just don't hold as well. Epoxy seems to be the king for this. So what I do is take a toothpick after I've mixed up the epoxy, just put a little bit down inside the the hole here in the clevis part. Then I take the rod and you know, just put a little bit of epoxy on the rod, and then kind of smear it around. So when I push the rod down inside there, I've got a nice even coating of epoxy inside this nylon sleeve to hold the rod in. You know, then let it harden up, and away you go. I like to use, these are for control horns. I bought a whole whack of these from Grayson Hobby a long time ago, because they're what RC Powers has the templates. And this is a brand new one, but I've actually recycled these. You know, you can take them, and if you're just very careful, you can shave the glue off after you've had them in your plane, and keep recycling them. There's all different kinds of control horns, and again, control horns are one of those things that everybody likes their own choice. I've found that these have worked really well for me for a very long time. Alright, so for the connection part on the servo, I buy these little 2mm, hold it up there, these little 2mm quick connects, and they have a little grub screw here. It's a 1.5mm grub screw, and that's what you tighten the thing up with. So I'll just show you this, if I can here, oops, I'm losing my grub screw. So they come with a couple of washers and the little nut on the end. So what I do is, before I put it into the servo arm, is I put one washer on, so that you're going to have a washer on each side of your nylon servo arm. So put a washer, and then you're push it into your servo arm. Most servos you'll probably have to drill out a little bit to get that little shaft to fit in there, and then the other washer. So let's pretend for a minute now that, you know, this is attached to the servo. And then what I do, this is just blue Loctite. I actually get it from Hobby King. Just put the smallest, tiniest little dab of Loctite down on the threaded piece, so that when I screw this on the end of this threaded piece, it spreads the Loctite out on the threaded part, and then, you know, just tighten it down so that when the thing goes back and forth, that the nut stays with it and it doesn't bind up, and then just let it cure, let the Loctite cure, and touch wood, I've never had one of these things back off on me. Now, oop, my little grub screw did fall out. So the and then of course your push rod just goes through there. Now, one thing, if you ever try this method, this little grub screw, you want to tighten it down sort of just enough. You know, you'll feel it as you tighten it. You'll feel it start to bite into the carbon a little bit, and then, you know, maybe another half turn, if that. You don't want to keep reefing it down so that it crushes the carbon. You want it to go in, you know, make a little bit of a bite into the carbon so that it doesn't slip, but you don't want to tighten it too much so that you crush the carbon, and then you end up breaking your push rod. So these are very light, very inexpensive, and again, because most of my planes are all the same size, I just recycle them and move them back and forth between planes. Now, the one disadvantage of them, as I'll show you on this, this is an RC Powers MiG-29 V4 that's had quite a few flights on it. So you can't bend them, obviously. So what I do is I angle my control horn and my servo. Now, you may not like that. I know some people are a bit more purist about having their control horn, you know, 90 degrees to the hinge. This control surface doesn't move all that far, and as long as you have the hole centered over top of the hinge, you know, I've still found it works great. The other option you can do is, if you want to have more flexibility, is you can splice using like unwaxed dental floss and a piece of the thin wire, you know, from like those micro push rods. What you do is, what I do anyway, or I have done in the past, put a very thin coat of epoxy on, then, you know, hold the metal piece parallel, and then take the unwaxed dental floss, sort of, you know, give it a good wrapping, and then a little bit more epoxy over that, so that when it hardens, it's almost like a fiberglass bond. You can also use, I know people have used CA. I like to use the epoxy, and then normally I'll just put a little piece of heat shrink over top of it, and then heat up the heat shrink so that that helps bind it on there. Then you can bend that wire, make a Z bend out of it, whatever you want to do. So if you want to be able to have more flexibility. But I've used this system with the angled servos and angled control horns on probably a dozen or more planes now, and it's worked just fine. So anyway, so there's my homemade linkages, and worked just fine. Again, I'll have links for all this stuff on the blog post when I post this video. All right, so there we go for push rods. Hi everyone, so back with you again to discuss some more on electronics. This portion will probably be a little bit longer and more detailed, as we're going to talk about power setups, the things that make your plane go. So I'm going to start off right at the business end, talking about propellers, and we'll discuss motors, speed controllers, and then batteries, and some other things. I've tested, I've been flying park jets now for a couple of years, and last year, just because I wanted to really find out what a lot of these motors that I'd read about, did for me and did in my planes. So I've tested about eight or nine different park jet motors, and for how I like to fly, I've basically narrowed it down to two. But having said that, there's a huge selection of different park jet motors of all different prices and sizes, weights, power, all that sort of stuff. So you have all kinds of stuff to choose from based on what you want from your plane and how much you can afford, all kinds of different variables. So the two motors, basically, well, three motors, but two of them are essentially the same, that I'm going to be talking about are just motors that I really like, but you use whatever you like. Okay, so propellers. So these are the two main propellers that I use. This is a 6x4, what's called a 6x4 APC. APC stands for Advanced Precision Composites, which is just the company that makes these props. Now this is actually a Hobby King knockoff, to be quite honest with you. Cheaper than buying the APC style, but works really well. So 6, pardon me. If you're just new in the hobby, 6 is the diameter, so tip to tip it's 6. And 4 is the pitch number. So the higher that number, the more aggressive the bite on the prop, which normally causes your motor to work a lot harder to turn it. Anyway, so APC 6x4. This was basically the prop that started it all for RC Powers. Anyway, they if you read stuff that Dave Powers from RC Powers wrote, essentially they designed their planes around the prop, and this was kind of the prop that they started off with. This is another very popular prop. It's called it's a 6x3 EMP. EMP stands for electric model power. This prop, you can see, side by side, they're quite a bit different. The blade on the 6x4 APC is much more aggressive here at the hub. And then the blade tapers out quite a bit more out to towards the end. The 6x3 EMP, although it does have a slightly less pitch, it doesn't have quite as aggressive a bite at the hub in the way the blade is shaped, and then the blade tends to stay sort of the same width until it gets out to the end. You may hear people talk about torque props and speed props. This is probably more of a torque prop, and what that means is that because of the blade shape and the lower pitch, it will spin up faster when you hit the throttle. So if you're looking for that pop and acceleration for aerobatics, or get yourself out of trouble, this prop will spin up faster. But this prop, once it gets going, is going to should give you, depending on the motor, should give you more speed. This is a very good all-around prop. But what I will say about this one is that I tested several different props on the motors that I tested, and this actually was a very good find for me in testing to actually see the results. Almost every motor I ran with it ran cooler and more efficiently, and again, like I mentioned, I got better acceleration, better pop, Probably suffered a little bit on the top end speed, but you know, it depends on what you're looking for. So what I would encourage you to do if you're, you know, if you're flying a park jet and you want to play around, you know, make sure, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what motors, the two motors that I use anyway, what props that they use and shouldn't use. But you know, if you're using a 6x4 APC prop, let's say on the very popular Hobby King D28, 26, 2200 kV motor, then you know, give the 6x3 EMP prop a try just for fun. You know, might cost you a couple bucks, but you know, it's kind of that fun testing to do at the field just to see the different results. So there's 6x3 EMP, 6x4 APC, two very popular park jet props. All right. So these 6x3 EMP props are notoriously out of balance. I've had to balance every single one that I've bought. And why that's important is, A, it makes your pardon me, makes your prop work much better, makes it more efficient and more effective. And secondly, the motors that I'm going to be talking about anyway, this motor, it can get up to 30,000 RPM. And I've made the mistake of putting an unbalanced prop on one time, and it flew okay, but after a couple flights, the vibration that was being caused ended up cracking the glue joint on my motor mount. And you know, lucky day for me, I didn't lose my plane, but it's something to consider. So obviously, you want to balance these props when you buy them. And I now 6x4, these, even though this is, like I said, it's a Hobby King prop, they're not as badly out of balance, but I still, having learned that lesson, I still balance these as well, and I find that my motors run a little quieter and more efficiently with a good balanced prop. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, this is a little magnetic prop balancer. I think this one's made by Dubro, although it has no label on it, and I've had it for quite a while. I'll post a link on the blog when I post this video. I found one very similar on Deal Extreme, vendor from China. Pardon me, sorry. That's I think around $5 or whatever. And personally, I think it's a very good investment. So essentially, you have two little sort of cone-shaped nuts here. You can see there, and they just go onto this little shaft. So you know, you just sort of put the prop in between the two nuts, and I try and balance it so that it's, you know, this way from tip to tip, that the prop is fairly well centered, and then, you know, just snug those down so that the prop's not going to wobble on you this way. And then these are just you've got a magnet here on either end, so this little shaft just essentially is suspended between those two magnets. So now we're looking at this prop, and we can see that this blade is touching the work surface. So that tells me that this side of the prop is heavier than this side of the prop. Now, if you've flown other electrics, you know, slow fly planes, you know, with the big props that are not turning high RPM, you know, I know in the past I've played around with those a little bit, and people just put little bits of Scotch tape on the prop to balance it. As I mentioned before, these props are going to be spinning at full speed, close to, depending on your motor, between 25 and 30,000 RPM. So your little piece of tape is probably not going to last very long. So this is the technique that I like to use. So this is the blade that I need to reduce the weight on, and I'm not going to bore you to death with balancing it completely, but this is the technique that I like to use. So this is 220 grit sandpaper. This is very fine. I would actually use this, or maybe even finer, although finer is going to take you a little bit longer. Don't use any coarse. I wouldn't use any coarse sandpaper, because what you're going to end up doing is you could put grooves and bigger scratches in the blade of your prop, and you want the blade of your prop actually to be as smooth as possible so that there's no disruption or messing up the airflow as the blade cuts through the air. So essentially, I just take the prop, hold the blade that doesn't need to be balanced, and then put the blade that needs to be balanced in there, and just kind of pinch the sandpaper around it like a taco, and then I sort of just grasp it firmly between my thumb and my forefinger, and then pull it out. Let me get this demo properly. There we go. So I just pull it out and just allow my finger and thumb to follow the blade, because I want to take the material off the blade as evenly as possible from the hub out to the tip, so that I don't have any imbalances. And then what I do is after every couple of sandings is I just run my fingers over it to kind of get rid of any bits of dust or material, put it back in there, and then see how we go. So this obviously still needs some more balancing. So what I normally do, I know it's a bit of a tedious process, but it's well worth it. So if I get a bunch of new props, I'll just sit down, you know, while I'm watching the hockey game or the football game, and I'll just balance them all. Oh, sorry, pardon me. And then I always make sure that the ones that I have in my flight box, in case I need a spare prop, are balanced as well, so that I don't do what I did the one time and end up vibrating my motor mount apart. So anyway, great little tool, you know, and I think well worth having for any kind of RC flying, really. And again, because these motors are spinning at such high RPM, I think having a balanced prop is very important. So we're just going to put this aside. All right, so that's props. So here we have moving on to motors. These two motors, this is the Focal Price 2700 kV motor. So the 2700, if you take that number, the 2700, and you multiply it by the voltage of your battery, so essentially a three cell battery is 11.1 volts, or at least that, you know, that's what you see published all the time. So you multiply 11.1 times 2700, and you get in the neighborhood of about 29 plus thousand RPM is the potential RPM that this motor should produce. So it's, you know, it's really going to scream when you get it wide open. So this motor is fairly inexpensive. It's I think right now it's about $12.39. However, Focal Price has been out of them for a few weeks, so I went searching around for a replacement. And this is another motor, 2700 kV motor, and this is from Deal Extreme, which is another big online vendor from China. So I've already bench tested it and weighed it, and it's identical to this motor here. It's about the same price as well, but right now it's actually available, so that's kind of nice. Both of these motors, when you get them, obviously they already have the bullet connectors on them. But these motors, when you get them, they don't come with the bullet connectors. Most motors that you buy, they have these little bullet connectors already soldered on them at the factory, but these ones don't. So you'll have to put those on there. But you know, if you're like me and you know, we tend to always buy these packs of bullet connectors in bulk. You know, there's the male and the female right there. You're going to have lots of these male ones around probably, because you know, when you get a new speed controller, you have to put these female ones on it, or that's what most people do, I think. But you know, you connect your motors and speed controllers whatever way you want. But so anyway, you should have those available. The other thing with these motors, the Focal Price 2700 motor comes with a collet similar to this, but they're not of a very high quality, and I found it's very hard to tighten the nut down tight enough to really secure the prop. So this is, you know, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference looking at it, but this one is from RC Timer. Cost me like $1, so very inexpensive and works really well. If you're already using, say like a Turnigy D2826 motor, a lot of the 2200 kV park jet motors would probably also have. This is a 3.17 millimeter shaft, so you could probably just take the, you know, one off of another motor and use it on this one, just for giggles and grins. The nice thing I like about it is because of its high kV and high RPM, I run a 6x3 EMP prop on it, and it has really great pop and acceleration. You know, when you hammer the throttle to it, and pretty decent high-end speed. Most of my planes that I've flown with this motor, you know, I'm getting 75 to 85 miles an hour top speed with this motor. It essentially weighs the same as a D2826 from Turnigy Hobby King. You do need to use a slightly bigger speed controller. It works best with a 40 amp speed controller because they draw. I've found most of them draw, although The website says they're 30 amp. They draw more in the neighborhood of 35 to 36 amp. So you want to use at least a 40 amp speed controller with them from my experience. From a standpoint of propellers, I've also tested this motor with a 6x4 EMP prop, and it ran very, very warm, and I didn't really see any noticeable difference at the field. So again, pretty much the only prop that I personally would ever run on this plane is this motor is a 6x3 EMP and a 40 amp speed controller. I've also tested it on 4S, and it just absolutely screams, but within a very short period of time you'd probably end up burning the motor out. It comes down very, very hot. So, you know, it's an inexpensive motor, you know, so you kind of get what you pay for. Touch wood, I've been very, very lucky. I have 7 planes right now with this motor in it, and in the year and a half I've been using it, I've only ever had one that's started to run rough after about 100 or so flights. The bearings in the back just started to go. But I have several of these motors with like 300-400 plus flights on them, and they're still running very, very strong. So anyway, I've had good luck with it, and it's a very peppy little motor for the price and the weight. Okay, so no, I'm sorry. So if we were to rate these, I kind of would call this like the V6 turbo, I guess if you want, type of motor. Then this bad boy right here, this is the NTM prop drive 2836 2700 kV motor from Hobby King. This to me is kind of like the V8 of park jet motors. It's a really powerful little beastie, but it's considerably heavy. Like this motor is I think at least an ounce. I think it's around 90, I want to say 90, 95, 99 grams, something like that. So it's at least 30 plus grams, so an ounce more heavy than the Focal Price motor. I'm not sure if I mentioned this kicks out about, on a 6x3 EMP prop, it kicks out about 36 ounces of thrust. So you know, lots of thrust there, depending on if you're looking for some extra thrust for your plane. This bad boy kicks out with a 6x4 APC prop on a 3-cell, kicks out about 42 ounces of thrust. And I've run it quite often on a 4-cell just for some real super speed fun. And it kicks out 50, I think around 55 or 56 ounces of thrust, so really, really screams. I regularly have built planes and had them up around the 90 plus mile an hour range with this motor on 3-cell, and on a 4-cell I've had an RC Powers MiG-29 up to 109 miles an hour. So nothing, you know, you see that piece of foam and glue that you built yourself go screaming by you at over 100 miles an hour, it certainly gets your attention. I've only ever run this, and only would ever run it on an APC prop. You're just probably wasting power if you put the 6x3 prop on it, because it's probably going to, you know, with the extra power, it's just going to, you're wasting the horsepower of the motor probably, because the prop's not going to give you what you need. So this, I'll talk about a bit more about the motor that you get in the package, but this motor is ready to go in the plane, and I just want to show you how I mount my props. It comes with this washer to sort of give you some space on this motor mount. So you're probably not going to be able to see this. The motor, the washer on this side, it has kind of a beveled edge, and then on this side is completely flat. So I put the completely flat side right up against the motor. Now, if you're just new to park jets or thinking about getting into them, the motor, let's say my hand is the front of the plane, so the motor is going to fly this way through the air. So my left hand here is the front of the plane. So you always want to get in that, you always want to make sure the numbers, you probably can't see them on the video, but the numbers that are written on the prop to tell you what the prop details, 6x4, those always go pointing towards the direction of travel, okay? The plane may or may not fly if you mount it backwards, but if you do mount it backwards, you're not going to have anywhere near the power that you need. It's not going to be a good experience. So always make sure the numbers on the prop are mounted in the direction of, facing the direction of travel. Okay, so there's the NTM prop drive 2700 ready to go. So when you buy this, this is how the motor comes. Okay, it's about $17 from Hobby King. So you need to make sure that you buy this little accessory pack. And again, I'll put the links to all this stuff on the blog when I post it. So this, what I like to do is you're going to have to cut this shaft off the back here. Okay, it's a pretty hardened steel rod. So I just use a hacksaw. I know a lot of people use Dremel tools if they've got them. That just makes the job go quicker. What I find works best is mount the X mount on the back of the motor first. And then what that does is that, you know, when you set it down on your surface and you're cutting it, it prevents the motor from rolling. You know, I mean, obviously I don't have it screwed on, but you can imagine with this screwed on, it's going to keep the motor more stable, and then you can use your hacksaw or your Dremel tool to cut it off. The other thing you want to make sure before you start cutting is just put some tape to cover these holes here so that none of your filings go down inside your motor, because that'll make your life really bad. So anyway, cut the shaft off and make sure you buy the at least one accessory pack per motor. The other thing I also like to do is I always have a couple of these extra accessory packs, and I always have one in my flight box. The reason being is I've had situations where I've landed a little hard or pancaked it. The prop's hit the ground, and then it's loosened off the prop nut, and then the prop nut is spun off into the ether somewhere. The plane's been okay, but essentially my day is done with that plane because I can't put another prop nut on it. So good to, they're I think $1.89 from Hobby King. So good to have one or two spare accessory kits, in addition to the ones that you'll need for each motor that you buy. So good thought there. Okay, so that's the NTM prop drive V8 motor. All right, so on to speed controllers. As I said, I've been around the park jets for about 2 years now, and I started off trying to do everything as cheaply as possible, and I went through several different types of inexpensive speed controllers, Hobby King Red Brick, the SS series from Hobby King, and they were good speed controllers, but they were heavy and a little bit more time consuming and tedious to get them, make sure they were set up properly. So this Turnigy Plush line is a bit more expensive. It's probably the best, or one of the best lines of speed controllers that Hobby King carries, and it has bulletproof written right on it, so it's got to be good, right? So anyway, this is a 40 amp speed controller that I use with the Focal Price motor. I know people get worried sometimes about running how many servos they're running. I found this has a 3 amp 5 volt battery elimination circuit in it, and I've regularly run 6 servos with this speed controller, and have never had a problem, including doing high alpha where all 6 of my servos are working. I've got spoilerons, my 2 spoileron servos working, elevon servos working, and my rudder servos working all at the same time, and touch wood, I've never had a problem. So if you want to put an external battery elimination circuit with this, if you're worried when you get up to 6 servos, that's up to you. But I can tell you from experience through hundreds and hundreds of flights, I've yet to have a problem with this one. These Turnigy Plush, they're really good. So there's a 40 amp that I use with the Focal Price motor, and this is a 60 amp that I use with the pardon me, the NTM prop drive. The NTM prop drive pulls on 3-cell, pulls regularly over 50 amps. So I like to run a 60 amp speed controller. I can still run it on 4-cell because I think this is capable of like 80 amps in a burst, which the motor pulls 68 amps I think on 4-cell with my experience. So as long as I'm not running at full throttle on 4-cell the whole time, the speed controller will handle it. You can see there's quite a bit of difference in size here and in weight. This is about 70 grams, this is about 40 grams, so this is a whole ounce heavier. So when you start looking at power setups, the NTM prop drive, you pretty much have to run at minimum on a 2200 3-cell to get any flight time out of it at all. So with the 2200 and the heavier speed controller and heavier motor, you're going to gain probably 3, maybe 4 ounces depending on what sort of power setup you normally use. So I've already talked a little bit about these bullet connectors, and you know that you're going to have to solder one male, or depending on how you like to set it up. You know, normally most of us put the female ones on the speed controller, because most of the motors, other than like the focal price motor that you buy, come with male bullet connectors on them already. So those are the thing I'll have to do. The other thing is, you know, it doesn't come with a battery connector, so you need to solder on whatever battery connector. You know, I use these Hobby King batteries, and they've all switched to XT60 a long time ago. Now, I am absolutely useless when it comes to soldering these wires onto these little connectors here. So I kind of cheat a little bit, and what I do is I buy these. You buy these in packs of like 5 or 6 at a time. And what I do is that you can see on these ones, I've kind of trimmed everything down. This wire weighs quite a bit, so you know, you don't want to have a big bunch of wire in your plane if you can help it, not only to save weight but also to save room. So I just sort of trim down what I need, and then I splice. Well, actually, I always try and remember to slide the heat shrink tubing on first, and then solder it. You know, matching red to red, black to black. Just splice the two of them together, and then put heat shrink over top of it, and that's much easier for me. I lost a plane because of my very poor soldering skills. I had one of these connections that I had done myself come off, so ever since then I've, you know, maybe it's dangerous putting my trust in Hobby King as well, but touch wood, thus far I haven't had a problem with any of these connectors coming off, and it's just easier, makes my life easier. So, all right, because I use all the same type of speed controller regardless of size, a while ago I invested in one of these programming cards that everything other than throttle points you can program with this card, and it just makes life so much easier. So I'll just demonstrate here very quickly, and hopefully you can see. So you just plug your ESC lead in that would normally go into your receiver, and then hook up a battery to it. Alright, so there you can see you've got a series of red lights that tells you what the setting is of your speed controller right now. So let's say, just for demo purposes, I want to switch. Right now my brake is set to off, so I want to turn that on. So I just press the button, you see the light flash, and press this other button, it moves it. Okay, press OK, boom. That's how fast it is to change settings, and you can change several settings, you know, very quickly. So let's, and then now that I've set that, every time I press this, so this is battery type. You know, it's either lithium ion or nickel metal hydride. Cutoff type, you can have soft cutoff or regular cutoff. Cutoff voltage, low, middle, high. Start mode, normal, soft, very soft. Timing mode, about 99% of ParkJet motors all like low timing. This one here, I don't have anything, there's nothing flashing there. You can set it up so that it plays music. It'll play like La Cucaracha or whatever, which, you know, to me is just annoying to the other guys that I fly with, so I don't do that. And this is governor mode. So back to the top, and now I want to put back my brake to off. Boom, done. So that's how quick it is. And this cost me like $8. And a lot of the companies that make speed controllers now, they've designed a programming card. And for $8, this is so much better for me than programming my speed controller using my transmitter, you know, where you've got this piece of paper laying in front of you that you've printed off the website, and you got to listen for 2 beeps, and then you move the stick up, then you move the stick down, listen for 2 more beeps, you know what I mean? To me, it just was a very long and tedious process, and I really never had the confidence that my speed controller was set up the way that I wanted it to. So great little investment there, these little programming cards. Okay, so while we're on the while we've got everything here, I'll just do a quick demo for you on setting the throttle points. This is something that when I first I didn't pay much attention to when I first got into to flying electrics and flying park jets. You know, I was just always in such a rush to get flying, and never paid much attention to it. And then I started to realize that I wasn't getting the full potential out of my power setup because I hadn't told all the components where zero throttle and full throttle was. So what could have been happening is when I hit full throttle, the systems might have thought, oh, okay, he's at 80% throttle, so I was kind of robbing myself of power there. So essentially, you just connect the motor. It's probably safest to do this without a prop on. So luckily we have a motor here without a prop. Doesn't matter, which direction it spins. You just want the motor connected. So I'll just get a receiver here. So this receiver has already been bound. So you want to make sure you bind the receiver before you do that. Okay, so that's set up. And then I just take my transmitter and you turn your transmitter on. If you have any switches, if you have any switches that like a fail-safe switch or a throttle kill switch, make sure that that's off so that it's not going to interfere with the process. So then what you do is you just advance your throttle stick. I fly mode 2, so wherever your throttle is, advance your throttle stick to 100%. Okay, then you take a battery. Now I'm just going to talk about this before I do it. What you're listening for is it'll beep and then you'll get 2 beeps and then you put the stick all the way down to the bottom, okay? And then you should hear three more beeps telling you that it's recognizing you have a 3-cell, and then a single beep telling you that everything's programmed. So, alright, so here we go. We're at 100% throttle. Everything's good. Plug in the battery. 2 beeps, 0, 3 beeps, single beep. Okay, so there's my throttle point set. So, doing a little funky dance there. But anyway, like I say, it's probably always safest to do that with your with the prop off in case something goes wonky during the whole setup. What I always do as well is whenever I do a different setup, if I change any one of these components, the receiver, the speed controller, or the motor, I'll just redo that again. As you saw there, it takes just a few seconds to do it, but then I'm always confident that I've got everything set exactly the way I want. So that's setting your throttle points. All right, so let's unplug all of this and shut that off. Okay. So I already talked about this connector. These are just sometimes you might find, depending on how you have to set up your plane from a standpoint of weight and balance, especially sometimes with these bigger, heavier motors like the NTM prop drive, you might have to put your speed controller, a good distance further forward to try and get the balance that you need. So it's handy to have these. I just bought these from Hobby King. I've got a couple pairs of them if I need them. You could make these on your own as well, but it's good to have some extension wires so that depending on your build, you can add a few inches onto the leads just to get your plane balanced. Obviously, it adds weight to your plane, but if it ends up being a few extra grams in order to make sure your plane's balanced properly, then to me it's worth it. So good to have some of those around, or have the materials that you need to make them yourself. All right, so we're getting down to the home stretch here. So let's talk about some batteries. So these are the 3 main batteries that I've had the best luck with. This is a Turnigy 1600 milliamp 30C discharge. So this battery works very, very well with the focal price motor if I want my plane to be good and light and I really want to rip around. I have a pretty heavy throttle thumb, so I set my timer for about 5 minutes with the focal price motor. Now if you're unfamiliar with how all these numbers work, again, I like the KV number on the motor. It can get kind of confusing. So it took me a while to learn this, and believe me, I burned out some components along the way and learned things the hard way. But essentially, if you know your motor, or your motor's rated to pull 30 amps, let's say, with the recommended prop, then obviously you want to make sure that you've got a speed controller that can handle that. So, a 30 amp or 40 amp, depending on what it is. So this battery is a 30C capacity discharge. and it's a 1600 milliamp. So how you find out how many amps this battery is able to provide is you take the, like, you know, right here it's pretty easy. It's 1.6, I multiply that by 30, so this should be capable in a burst of providing 48 amps. So that's plenty for this motor, because as I mentioned, this motor pulls 36 amps. So this battery shouldn't have to work very hard, okay? If this was down closer to say this was a 20C discharge and it was producing 32 amps and this motor was pulling 36 amps, you're going to overwork your battery pretty quickly, okay? So it's it's a bit of a conundrum though, because you know, you say, oh well, I really want to protect my battery, and then you go get a 1600 battery with a, you know, a 90C discharge or something ridiculous like that. The problem is that the higher the C rating, normally the heavier the battery. So just be cautious of that. So these two batteries are essentially the same. This is an 1800 milliamp. These two batteries actually weigh pretty much the same within a couple of grams. The difference being is that this is just a bit bigger fuel tank. So on this battery with the focal price motor, I get maybe 545 minute flights. And I like to run, I don't run my batteries down, you know, when they're fully charged, they should be theoretically at 4.2 volts per cell. And so I don't like to run my batteries down below 3.7 volts per cell, just for the long-term health of the battery. So, you know, if you're trying out a new motor, what I suggest is, you know, set your timer on your radio for, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes. Let it fly around, then bring it down, and I'll just show you. Should have got this out earlier. This is a great little gadget here for, I think, like a couple of bucks from Hobby King. And what it lets you do is, you know, right away you can determine the health of your battery. So you plug. You know, hold it like this. The black wire on the bottom of your balance goes on the bottom. Fit the pins in there. So you can see it cycling through, telling me the health of each one of my cells. My total voltage is 12.4, and it'll just keep cycling through there. So when you're first trying out a new power system, I would encourage you to test that, because it'll just tell you what is actually happening with your batteries, with your motor setup, how much it's drawing on it, you know, very simply. And like I said, this is a couple of bucks. And you know, so if you're flying and all of a sudden your battery, you know, your motor really starts to sag, one of the first things you can check is your battery, because as these batteries get older, they don't, you know, they just don't hold their charges as well. Or if pardon me, they've been overcharged or over depleted, then they can start doing funky things. So anyway, those are kind of lighter weight batteries. These are around, I want to say 147 grams, I think. I can't remember what that is in ounces. But so this is a nice lightweight 2200 battery. It's a 25C discharge. So again, using the formula, 2.2 times 25 is 55, I guess. Apologize for the math. But anyway, it's plenty for what this motor needs. And it's fairly light for a 2200 battery. It's only I think about 167 grams, so it's only 20 grams more than this. But I get for the way that I like to fly, I get about 6.5 minute flights out of my plane, and it also adds a little bit more weight to my plane if you know, if I'm flying in windier conditions. And sometimes I just personally I like to fly my planes in around the 20 to 22 ounce range. If I'm using the focal price setup, I just like how the overall handling and the feel and their ability to stay stable and penetrate the wind. So, but these are very good little batteries if you're looking for a mid-range weight, but with the extra capacity. Pretty good little battery. This has become sort of my favorite all-round battery, and the main reason is that it's a 40C 2200, so it provides tons of amps. So I can take a bunch of these to the field, and if I have you know, a focal price motor setup and a NTM prop drive motor setup, it doesn't matter, this battery will run both of them. On really windy days, for planes that I'm running the focal price motor with, I will use this battery just to give me that extra little bit of weight. It's almost an ounce heavier than this one. So adjusting your battery size and weight is a very easy way to adjust the stability, wing loading, and things like that on your plane. Within reason, you know, I fly 8 months of the year. I fly in pretty windy conditions, so I need that extra little bit of weight to help my plane stay stable and penetrate the wind. And these are actually pretty inexpensive. They're less than $13, but thus far I've run a few hundred cycles through all of them, and just run great. I'm really happy with this for the price. Okay, so this is the last thing. This is a precision watt meter and power analyzer. Now this is something, if you're just new into the hobby, you know, you don't need to worry about it too much. But if you get playing around with different motors and props and battery setups, and you want to sort of check what's going on, this is an excellent thing to have. I carry this normally in my flight box so that I can you know, test setups when they're in the plane. This one cost me about $25. It's from Hobby King. There's other good ones from Hobby King that are a little bit cheaper than that. This probably has way more than what I need, but it works well. So essentially, all you do is you're plugging your speed controller into one end, your battery into the other end, and then this. So you've got load on one end, source on the other end, and you know, it'll tell you at whatever throttle setting, it'll tell you how many amps are being drawn, watts, you know, other things that you might be interested in. So it's a bit more of an advanced tool, but if you've been around in the hobby for a little while, the one thing about some of the Chinese vendors, you know, as I've mentioned, sometimes their specs are not that accurate or not available whatsoever. So before you before you have motors and speed controllers and batteries you know, overheating and burning up in your plane, you can test them with these and play around if you're not sure, because this will give you feedback on exactly what's happening. So again, maybe a bit more of an advanced thing, but in the long run, if you're going to be playing around with electric park jet or RC motors, I would strongly suggest that you get one of these, because it'll just tell you exactly what's going on with your power system. Okay, so this has been a long section here. I hope that there's been lots of stuff here that's been valuable to you. Again, power setups are like transmitters. You know, you sit 10 guys down in a room and you're going to get 10 different answers, and everybody's got their motor that they love, and you know, and other motors that they don't love, and etc., etc. So I just, you know, I found what I like to use, because I took the time to test them all, both on the bench and at the field, and this is why, you know, I came up with the motors that I want. But again, you use what you like, and what works for you, and that's the main thing of this hobby, is do your own thing, quite honestly. But you know, try and educate yourself and be armed with some information about your setup, so that you don't end up you know, setting your plane on fire or hurting yourself because you know, you've mismatched motor, prop, battery, speed controller. So anyway, so I'm going to reset our movie set here, and we'll come back with talking a little bit about finishing planes, and so we're getting close to the end of this video. I think just a couple more sections, and we'll be ready to go. So I'll be back with you shortly. Hi everybody, I just want to talk kind of quickly about finishing, coloring, painting your planes. Kind of some things that I like to do. I've already demoed the use for this knife. You know, this comes in handy if you really want to, you know, shave off some square corners first. Again, using a nice sharp blade, you know, it'll save you some sanding time. Or, you know, if you need to do a lot of shaping for whatever reason, this is a handy knife to do that with. For sandpaper, I've used these sanding blocks here that you get. I think I get these at Walmart for like $1 or whatever. These are one handy thing to use. Essentially, what I do is, for the initial bit of sanding, you know, when I really want to remove some foam, is I like to use, I found that 150 grit works really well for me. It takes enough off without ripping the foam up too bad. You always want to be very careful when you're sanding any kind of foam, dollar store foam, Adepron, probably model plane foam, it might be similar, is you want to use a fairly light pressure. You don't want to press too hard, because you know if a bit of grit on the sandpaper catches, it'll tear gouges in the foam, and then you've kind of defeated the purpose of sanding your plane. What I will say about sanding is, not only does your plane look better, and again, if you're just a beginner, don't worry about this too much. But as you're increasing your skills and you want more and more out of your plane, a good sanding job, good overall sanding job on a plane probably saves you, I find on average, saves me at least ½ an ounce. The other thing is, it makes your plane far more slippery through the air. I've been experimenting for about 6 months now with, like on this MiG, with symmetrical leading and trailing edges, and I found that the increase in speed and efficiency of how the plane goes through the air is just unbelievable. Like in the neighborhood of 7 or 8 miles an hour over not sanding it and beveling it. So it's one of those simple things. It's a messy job. It takes a little bit of time. I like to do it outside, and normally I'll wear one of those paper masks, because you don't want to be breathing in any of that dust and stuff from the foam. But anyway, again, just something to think of. So I start off with the 150 grit, take off most of what I want, and then I normally finish with 220 grit, just to make it nice and smooth and kind of feather in the edges where I've sanded with the thicker stuff. Just makes the plane look better and be smoother through the air. So that's kind of what I use for sanding, but you can use whatever technique for sanding that you want. Alright, I tend to paint my planes with acrylic craft paints, water-based acrylic craft paints. That this one is a very inexpensive one. I got this is from the dollar store. I think $1.25. This is a higher quality apple barrel, which I've purchased at Michael's. Pardon me, please. The more expensive ones tend to have better quality pigments and stuff in them, so it all depends on what you want to spend. Depron tends to, from my experience, with bare Depron, if you have your planes around for quite a while, like I have my F-18 V3 has been around for over a year. Over time, with exposure to the elements and UV rays of the sun and all that sort of stuff, the Depron will start to, not that it will get soft and mushy, but you'll feel that it's starting to change consistency a little bit as it's breaking down. But if you paint it, it will help it last a little bit longer, and your airplane looks better, I think, anyway. So one thing I just learned actually with a recent build, let me just grab this. These paints can be fairly thick sometimes, and the consistency of them is not consistent through the brands. So what I did was I experimented, because I was finding that a full-up paint job was adding over an ounce, about 40 grams to my plane. So maybe I was getting a little slap happy with the paint. But so I experimented on my last build, and what I did was I used these little cups. I get these from Walmart, I think. They're just little plastic cups. The nice thing about them is I can recycle these. I'll pour whatever paint I think I need, and it's just a little easier to handle. And then, using my brush, I take what I need, brush it onto my plane. If you wash these out with, super hot soapy tap water, I can get several uses out of them. So, you don't have to throw them away. You can save some money and save the environment a little bit by recycling them. So what I do, like I say, I'll put kind of what I think I need, a little squirt of paint in there. And what I did the last time was I used this 50-50 alcohol and water compound, and I just poured a tiny little bit in there, and then I would stir it up with actually just a piece of bamboo skewer, I think. And I got it down to, I guess, about the consistency of maybe like table cream or coffee cream, maybe a little thicker than that. And the pigments and the colors held up really, really well, but I ended up saving myself almost 10 grams on my paint job because the paint was lighter. Now, using this alcohol and water compound, the paint, although it was thinner, it ended up drying about the same amount of time as the non-diluted paint. You know, the alcohol is going to evaporate off a little faster. If you use just all water, it might take a bit longer to dry. So anyway, this worked out really well. I know, you know, when guys are using spray guns, I don't have a spray gun, they'll water paint down using like Windex and things like that. So, but this, I just happen to have this handy and it works well. So these brushes, they're not very very high quality. Again, I get these from my favorite RC store, the dollar store. And because this paint is water based, you know, these just wash up real easy with hot tap water. Work really well that way. So the other option, if you're looking for just a quick color job on your plane, I actually put like on this MIG on the bottom here. This is obviously that needs a bit of a touch up, but this is actually just black magic marker that I put on there on the bottom. And what this does is it's really great for contrast, because you can see the rest of the bottom of the plane is white. So having these two bright black bars here really helps with the contrast. The magic marker adds pretty much zero weight to the plane, and then you know, if you want to touch it up, it's real easy. Just pop the cap off, give it a few more swipes with the marker, and away you go. And again, you can do, you know, I've done paint schemes. Actually, the two planes that I have the most flights on, my F-18 and FRC Foamy's SU-35 Mark II, just had you know, drew out some patterns and then just colored it in. You know, with magic marker. Now the marker will fade, and it doesn't give you the foam the same protection as paint does. But the nice thing about it is, if you're worried about weight, you can add some great color to keep track of your plane with magic marker, and it adds pretty much zero weight to your plane. So something to keep in mind. Or you know, I've even done planes where I've sort of done part magic marker, part paint, depending on what I wanted. And again, these are very inexpensive. I just get these at the dollar store, you know, a pack of three or four of them of different colors. And it's a very easy, quick way to put some color on your plane so you can get it in the air. Alright, so that's sanding and finishing. So I'm just going to reset here, and then I think I've got, I want to talk a little bit about just some miscellaneous stuff that I've realized that I may have missed. And then I'm going to do, just before we close, I'm going to do a little bit of a blurb on some of the stuff that I found is really handy to have in my flight box for quick field repairs and things like that. So anyway, so next up we'll just talk about kind of a miscellaneous cleanup, and then after that we'll be talking about the flight box, and then we should be done. So we'll see you very soon. Hi everybody, just kind of a miscellaneous cleanup here on some things that I haven't covered in this video to this point with respect to stuff I have in my workshop. This is actually just an old piece of 2x4, as you can see. I find this is really handy. I've drilled some holes in here, and you may or may not be able to see the burn marks around them from the solder, but when I'm doing like the bullet connectors and stuff on my motors and my speed controllers, I find it's really easy just to be able to drop the little brass bullet connector down in the hole, and then it's not going to go anywhere, and then I can just solder it in. Also, you know, if I need to cut anything, again, I'm in a spare room here, not in like a garage workshop. You know, this is kind of an area where you know, if I'm cutting a shaft off of one of the NTM motors, or need to use my hacksaw, I have this. I've also mounted, you can see there's multiple holes in here. I've mounted motors on here when I've done my bench testing and all that sort of stuff. So handy to have that around for me anyway. I think it's a good idea especially when you start to get. As I may have mentioned earlier in this video, when I first started building, I was a horrible overbuilder. I used to build my planes so heavy. You know, I was up in like 900 gram areas. It was just ridiculous, because I had it stuck in my head that, you know, the more glue and the more reinforcement, you know, my plane was going to last longer. And actually, the absolute opposite is true. You know, because of good old Mother Nature and physics. If you got a big heavy plane, you know, the Depron only has a certain amount of resilience to impact. Well, a 900 gram plane as compared to a 500 gram plane, when that plane hits the ground, the devastation of the, you know, when all of that weight comes to a sudden stop is going to be a lot worse than on a 500-gram plane. So my lighter, you know, it took me a long time. It took me probably over a year to get out of that paradigm and start building lighter. So it's handy to have one of these little, this is just like a little kitchen scale. I'm not sure where I picked this up. I might have just picked it up at Walmart, dollar store, whatever. Very handy to have. It'll measure up to 10 pounds. Not that I'll ever need that, but it's handy to have. So you know, you can weigh components, weigh your plane, things like that. So as you get more and more, you know, got the hobby, the RC park jet bug, or any hobby bug really, it's a good little purchase to have one of these little scales. Just gives you a better idea what things weigh as you're thinking about your build and piecing together your components. So that's a pretty handy little gadget to have. Okay, I always keep a box of scrap foam. I like to, you know, if you're always going to have pieces of foam where you know, you end up with strips like this. So I just cut them up, and you know, because these are great for you know, squeegeeing off, putting epoxy, applying epoxy, squeegeeing off excess glue. You know, you can run when you're trying to make a 90-degree glue joint kind of thing. You can run this right in the groove there. You know, 90-degree bend to spread the glue out, make a nice strong glue joint. So I always have a good supply. Every time I cut out a plane, I kind of refill this. So that's a handy thing to have in your workshop. All right, I have a couple of different types of pins here. These are little pins that when I'm building, I use to hold pieces of foam together. So I can get a couple of pieces of foam. So you know, you got a couple of pieces of foam here that you know, that you're gluing together, and you want them to hold, you know, until the glue dries. What I actually like to do is I actually like to put the pin in sort of at an angle, you know, in between the two pieces, and then you know, if I really want to hold it tight, I'll put one in sort of at the other angle like that, and then just leave those in there till the glue dries. The nice thing about these thin ones, you know, they have these little plastic balls on the end, so they're easier to get a hold of, and because they're fairly thin, you know, they don't leave gaping big holes in your foam. So good to have these for, especially when you're shaping noses and stuff like that, and you need to hold some pieces together till they're dry. Again, I think I got these at the dollar store, real cheap, but very handy to have. These are kind of a T-pin. These are a little bit thicker, more heavy-duty pin. I will still use these for, you know, holding pieces together at times. The nice thing about these are for is if you need to mark something on your foam, like your center of gravity or whatever, is they poke a big enough hole down in the foam so that you can actually see it afterwards. So handy to have some of these around. I still use these quite a bit. So you've heard me talk about having toothpicks around. Again, I just buy a ton of these at the dollar store at the time. These are the ones that are tapered on both ends, but they're awesome for, you know, mixing up epoxy. If you need to apply glue in a very small area, or you want to apply it very thinly, you know, handy to have a box of these around. You can also use these, you know, if you've had a dam, you want to reinforce a certain area, you know, you can jam you know, jam it into one bit of foam, and then, you know, jam it into the other bit of foam, kind of like that. You know, I'm not going to push it all the way in, but you get the idea there. You know, so that'll help provide a little reinforcement. So I think it's, you know, for the money, I don't know, there's probably about 1,000 of them in there, worth having a box of these around your workshop. Okay, I guess no person, no human being should be too far away from having zip ties. There's just a ton of useful things that you can use zip ties for. I know lots of people actually secure their motors with zip ties, but I like to try and clean up my wire bundles when after oh, pardon me. I like to clean up my wire bundles after I finish my plane build. So these little thin zip ties come in really handy. And again, I think I get these at the dollar store. So very, very handy little thing to have. And you might, you might want to also have some bigger ones around depending on what you need them for. But I find this size here is quite sufficient for most of what I need to use. I use these little magnets, very, very strong rare earth magnets. Oops. You can see there. I bought like 400 of them off eBay 2 years ago for like $7 or whatever. And these are super strong magnets, so I use these when I, for my hatches. See on this MIG here, I've got a single magnet. Hopefully you can see that single magnet there, and then it just helps hold your electronics bay hatch on there. So very, very, very handy to have some of these around. Again, if you search around on eBay, most of the online hobby places sell them. They're very inexpensive and very useful. I like to use, this is again a Grayson Hobby motor mount for 6mm Depron. It's already got the holes and everything pre-drilled in it. This one's brand new. Again, this is another thing that I recycle. I pull them out of a plane. I'll scrape as much of the foam off as I can, unless the thing's broken, and I've recycled these. So, or if you have a workshop, you can make your own, whatever. And they don't have to be round like this. I know people have made them with just, made them square. Whatever you need to secure your motor strongly to your airplane, these work great. I just keep a bunch of screws. I normally find, if you want to build super light, you get, every time you buy servos, or a lot of times you buy servos, you get these little super tiny screws. So those are light. The only thing that I find is difficult about them is that they've got Phillips heads, and I like to, because I'm in Canada, almost all the screws you buy at the hardware store have this little square Robertson head. So these are the ones that I use. I think these are like a number 4, pretty small screw, but they work just fine. So always good to have. And this is just an old pill bottle, so it's good to store those so they're not all over the place. All right, this is industrial strength Velcro. I buy the great big rolls of it from the from Home Depot. And it's self-adhesive, so you just peel this shiny plastic part off, and then it has self-adhesive. I put the furry part. I always put the furry part in the plane, and I keep this hook part on my batteries, because then it doesn't. If you're flying out at the field, you don't want, if you put your battery down somewhere, you don't want to end up coming home with bugs and stuff like that, or whatever stuck in the furry part. So I always put the furry part of the Velcro in the plane and put this hook part on the battery. I just want to show you a little. For quite a while I was having problems with my with this Velcro lifting up off my planes. When I was pulling my batteries out. So what I started doing, it was kind of I guess a tip that I saw on Flight Test. Where they were scuffing up the sides of their servos just using the tip of a razor blade, because the servo, the surface of the servo is, the consistency of the plastic, sometimes glue won't bond to it well. So they were sort of scuffing that up, which is what I do with my servos as well. So I just, I'm sitting around gazing at my navel one day, and I thought, oh, this might be a good idea. So what I do with my foam is I'll just kind of, scratch it up a little bit, put some grooves in it with my knife, where I'm going to glue the Velcro down. So you can see it, I just kind of roughly scratch some grooves in it. And then what I do is I just put a few little beads of hot glue there on that, and then I press the Velcro down on top of that. And what I find is that when it, the hot glue gets driven down into the grooves, and it helps hold the adhesive of the Velcro on a little bit better. Anyway, don't know what the science is there, but it just, touch wood, it seems to work better for me that way. So that's kind of what I use there. All right, so before you think I'm going to be building a plane out of these 2x4s, I just wanted to show you that these are, I don't have any sort of fancy racks or anything, but at certain points of the build, especially after you get your fuselage and your wing joint together, you know, there are some times where you want to have the plane fairly stable and solid, so you know, so you can work on it. So what I find, again, these are just scrap pieces of plywood, and I've just found they work really well. You know, they're super adjustable. You can put them as wide or as close together as you need to hold your plane the way you want to, and works just great. I mean, obviously the tails are on this. Normally most planes, if I have the option to not put the tails on to the end, I wait till the end so that I, you know, if I need to flip it on its back, then it'll lay. Anyway, these just this is just something that I've been using for a long time. Works great for me. It's kind of an easy support. Gives, you know, holds my plane sort of level for when I'm working on it. So. All right, so there we go. So there's kind of, hopefully I've cleaned up all the miscellaneous stuff that I wanted to clean up. Not that I've cleaned up my workbench, but anyway, cleaned up with respect to goodies that I use here. So I'm just going to reset here and get some goodies out of my flight box, and I just kind of want to show you some basic stuff that I like to have in my flight box out at the field, so that I can do, you know, if my plane's not too badly damaged, I can do a quick repair and get back flying again without having to drive home. So be right back with you. Hi everyone. So we're in the last section here of my my workshop video. This is stuff obviously that I won't necessarily use at the workshop. I'll use at the field, but again, just stuff that I wanted to pass on to you from lessons that I've learned over a couple of years of flying RCs and primarily flying RC planes and primarily flying park jets. So these are just a few of the items that, and I have more stuff, but I didn't want to drag it all out. Just some things that I found really handy and I use quite a bit. You always want to have some spare props, you know, so depending on what type of props you like to use, you know, if you use 2 or 3 different types of props, I would suggest always having at least one spare for every prop that you might use. You know, reason being is that that way, no matter what plane you take to the field, hopefully you got have a spare prop for it. So I use primarily 6x4 EPC and 6x3 EMP. So I have one of those spare in my box, flight box all the time. And these, as I mentioned before, have already been balanced, so they're ready to go in the plane in case I, you know, nick a blade, or you know, you pancake and you never know when you snap a prop or grind a piece off. So it's always nice to have a spare prop. And sometimes if you find your plane's just running rough, you know, even just swapping a prop sometimes will make it run more smoothly. Okay, from a standpoint of tools, I like to have a screwdriver for pretty much every screw that's in my plane. I like to use this one again for the servo screws in case I need to tighten a servo screw. This one is for my my quick connects on my servos if I want to be able to adjust my push rods and my throws on my control surfaces. And then again, this is just a general multi-driver, so you know, this will cover sort of everything else that I need, motor mount screws and that sort of stuff. So always good to have a screwdriver for pretty much everything you might need to tighten or loosen on your plane. I like to have a you know, a good knife out there. You know, you never know when you need to, you know, cut tape or cut tape or trim some foam, whatever. You just never know. So it's always good to have a good sharp knife out there at the field in your flight box as well. This Sharpie marker, what I like to use these Sharpie markers for is, you know, you never know when you might want to just mark something or write something down, whatever. Always good to have something to write with, I think, when you're at the field. I like to, especially when I'm mating or dialing in a plane, once I get the battery sort of exactly where I want it and have the plane dialed in, I'll use the Sharpie marker to just draw a line so that I know where the battery, you know, the end of the battery is, and then I can continually put the battery in the same spot every single time. Just going to relay to you a little story battery so you don't make the same mistake. I've had planes where I've balanced them for a 2200 battery and a 1600 battery, and then so I've had the two lines, and I guess I thought I was being pretty smart. I didn't bother marking, the one was 22 and the other was 16, and I made the mistake one time of putting the 2200 battery where the 1600 battery was supposed to go, and needless to say, I launched my plane and just about augured it into the ground, and lost a couple hundred heartbeats in stress. Managed to save my plane. So if you do end up in a situation like that, where you like to be able to have the capability of using two different batteries in your plane, is make sure you write 16 or 22 or however you want to label them, so that by mistake you don't put the battery, the light battery where the heavy battery is supposed to go, or vice versa. So yeah, a bit of a tough lesson learned there, but anyway, always handy to have a Sharpie marker at the field. Mentioned this little gadget before. This allows you to to check right off the bat very quickly what the voltage is like on your battery. If sometimes I find as batteries are getting older, I'll check them after I come down from flight. If you start to see a big imbalance between the cells. The other thing, and again, ask me how I know this. If you got a couple batteries sitting there on the table or whatever, and you're not sure which one is good and which one is bad, a quick check with this will tell you which is good and which is bad if one of them's already been used. I've made the mistake of putting a battery that had already been used in a plane that flew for about 100 feet, and then I was doing the dead stick glide in, and to save my plane, but caused myself a lot of stress because of my buffoonery. So good to have one of these, and like I said, they're just a couple of bucks. I like to keep some zip ties. I take zip ties out there with me again. Zip ties, duct tape or electrical tape. Just kind of one of those universal things that you can do all kinds of repairs and applications with. So always good to have a few of these, I think. I have a little bag just of spare hardware. So motor mount screws, grub screws, things like that, servo screws, anything that I might need to replace. Pardon me, if they get vibrated out or just fall out or whatever. I also have some smaller washers in this bag that you might be able to see. Sometimes if I'm testing out a new plane and for some reason it wants to zoom or dive every time I hit full throttle, then it might be that the motor's off or it needs to be shimmed. So you can do that with washers, or you can even use a toothpick and slide a toothpick down in between the motor and the motor mount, and then be able to adjust it. It's a bit fussy fine tuning. I try not to if I can, but sometimes you have a plane that just won't balance unless you put a little bit of weight on one side or whatever. So these are just big, heavy galvanized washers from Home Depot, so they're dirt cheap. You can also buy those little self-adhesive lead weights at a hobby shop, but I find that these work well, and you can just tape them on initially depending on what you think you need to do. But luckily for the last year or so, my planes have been balancing out pretty nicely, so I've never had to use that. But always good to have at least one or two bits of spare hardware for kind of every bit of hardware you have, any screws, that sort of stuff. This is the spare accessory pack that I mentioned for the NTM prop drive motor. I also have in my flight box, I have a spare prop collet for the focal price motor, in case you lose the bullet nut here, which is probably what you'll end up losing if you lose anything. So rather than having to come home, just slap a new one on there. And it's like everything else, just remember in the back of your head, okay, I had to use this out of my flight box. Replace it, or then you go out to the field and you realize you haven't replenished your supply. So this is Velcro. I like to, again, if I'm maidening a plane or dialing a plane in, sometimes when you first balance it at home, you balance it on the stock CFG, and then you get it out to the field and you find out you've got to move your battery significantly further forward or back. You may not have accounted for that with your Velcro in your plane. So rather than having your battery barely holding on by a half an inch length of Velcro, you can stick a little bit more Velcro in your plane. So I have the hook and the furry side, in case I need to put some more Velcro on a battery as well. So good to have a few scrap chunks of that. I always, I personally, this is something that's not 100% necessary, but I like to have a ruler with me because if, I need to measure something, it's, it's handy to have. Sometimes what it's good for is that, if you're finding that, you get airborne and your plane is always pulling to one direction, and even if you're trimming it up or it rolls faster one way than it rolls the other, sometimes it's the despite what you have dialed in, programmed into your radio, you might have one servo, pardon me, because not all servos are created equal. You might have one servo that's traveling further than the other. So it's a good idea sometimes to just be able to measure exactly how far a surface is moving on your plane. So I think, you just find yourself an inexpensive ruler and keep that in your flight box. It's a handy thing to have. And when you get into doing some modifying and testing and stuff like that, it's always good to have a ruler. I like to take a bind. I always have a bind plug for my my receiver. Sometimes you get out to a field and you start your plane up and it's doing all kinds of funky things and you're trying to troubleshoot what's wrong with it. Sometimes just simply rebinding your receiver to your transmitter will kind of reboot that. So I always like to have one of these handy for my receivers. My flight box comes in handy. Okay, these are two things that I find very necessary when I've banged a plane up, or three things I guess they are. This is kind of the poorest man possible kind of glue gun for use out at the field. So just a Bic lighter or any kind of cheap little lighter, and this is just a glue stick, and obviously you can tell it's got some history. I've had to use it in the past. So what I do with this, I just got a couple pieces of scrap foam here to kind of demonstrate. So for some smaller stretches, you'll be able to smear a certain amount of glue on here. If you have a really big long crack, it might take a few applications. Normally what I just have this stuff for is that sometimes you have a little gonk and it's after you get over feeling sorry for yourself, you think, oh well, I can fix it up quick at the field and keep flying. So you have to be the judge of whether your plane should still fly with that, or if even after a quick repair, or even if you have repaired it, if you don't want to further damage your plane because you couldn't repair the damage. So you have to kind of make that own judgment call on your own. So here's my my very inexpensive low-tech glue gun. So I just basically get a flame going on the lighter. And this takes a little bit of practice to know sort of how hot to get it. It's going to get a little bit black. You'll see it start to get goopy. And I let it cool just a tiny bit before I smear it. So, smear it where you want the glue. Again, it's not real pretty. It's a bit messy. And then take your other piece, or if it's just a crack, then you can smear it along the crack in the foam. Of course, you got all these little hot glue hairs that come out afterwards. So anyway, that's a very quick and dirty, and then that'll set up in no time. So it might be something you want to practice a little bit to get used to the consistency. What you want to avoid is having a huge, big glop of dripping hot glue, because when that hits the foam, it's it's going to be hotter probably than when you use it in your glue gun, and you'll end up melting a hole right through the foam. And don't make sure that it's it's not a flame like it's a candle when you go and rip, because you'll just burn a big hole in your plane. So you just got to be careful with that. And then this is again the fiberglass strapping tape that I've talked about earlier. I have a roll of this in my flight box. Sometimes like let's say you snap a chunk of your elevon off or a chunk of your vertical stabilizer on. So when you glue that back on, using this method, you smear it along there and fit the other piece on. Sometimes just putting a piece of tape like this on either side of that wound, I'll call it, will help give you a little bit more reinforcement so you can keep flying. And then when you get it home, it's your choice if you want to clean up the repairs a little bit more. But this is just stuff at the field. If it takes a few minutes to do, you can see that hot glue, that's rock hard already. So that was a very quick repair. And I'd be back up in the air in no time. Again, it doesn't look pretty, but hey, if it's one of those situations where you still got a bunch of batteries you want to burn through, you just basically want to get your plane fixed up and back up in the air and have some more fun. All right, so I think that's it for the video, folks. As I've mentioned several times, I will be posting a post on the blog, migzerus.blogspot.ca, that I share with my great friend Stefan from the great state of Alabama. And it will have a laundry list of links to as much of this stuff that I've talked about in this video that I can remember. Also, below the video on YouTube, if you post your comments or questions, if you want, if you want clarification or you have questions about certain things, I will do my very best to try and help you out. So I appreciate you watching the video. I appreciate your patience with, my marathon ums and ahs and pregnant pauses, and and I know that sometimes I've probably gone, too far in depth for most of you, or maybe some of it's gone right over your head if you're just getting into the hobby. I'm hoping that we've covered something here for everybody, and basically what's worked for me in my park jet career. So again, thank you very much for watching, and take care.